Dalton Reeves stood frozen in his doorway, rifle trembling in his calloused hands, staring at the woman who'd just stepped off the stagecoach. The woman whose photograph hadn't prepared him for the terror written across her beautiful face. She wasn't looking at him. She was scanning the horizon like a hunted animal, and in that moment he knew. Whatever she was running from was coming for both of them. If you want to know whether Dalton will protect this mysterious stranger or lose everything he has left, stick around until the end. And don't forget to hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The Wyoming wind cut through Red Hollow Ridge like a dull blade, stirring up dust devils along the main street where Dalton Reeves sat outside the general store, waiting. His hat was pulled low, more out of habit than necessity, and his boots were crossed at the ankle in a pose that might have looked relaxed to anyone who didn't notice how white his knuckles were on the armrest of that wooden bench. 3 months since he'd sent the letter. 6 weeks since he'd gotten a reply. 2 days since the telegram confirmed her arrival. Dalton wasn't a man given to nervousness. 34 years of hard living had beaten that out of him, but his stomach felt like he'd swallowed stones. He'd done plenty of fool things in his life, but ordering a wife through the mail might have been the stupidest. Then again, stupid or not, the ranch was falling apart. The house was worse. And the silence out there was starting to feel less like peace and more like a coffin he'd climbed into while still breathing. The stagecoach was late. Typical. Marshal Tucker wandered over, thumbs hooked in his belt, that permanent smirk on his weathered face. "Heard you got a bride coming in today, Reeves." Dalton didn't look up. "Word travels. Small town, not much else to talk about." Tucker spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "Mail order, huh? That's a hell of a gamble. Rather gamble than die alone in that house." "Fair enough." Tucker studied him for a moment. "She know about Elizabeth?" Dalton's jaw tightened. Didn't see how that was relevant to the arrangement. Might be relevant to her. Then she can ask. The marshal shrugged and walked off, leaving Dalton alone with his thoughts again, which was exactly where he didn't want to be. He pulled out the photograph from his shirt pocket for the 100th time. Small, creased at the corners. A woman's face stared back at him, unsmiling but not unfriendly. Serena Vale. 27 years old, no family, experienced in housekeeping and ranch work, seeking a quiet life in the West. The last part had seemed almost too good to be true. Nobody sought quiet unless they were running from noise. The stagecoach rattled into view just past noon, trailing a cloud of dust thick enough to choke on. Dalton stood slowly, feeling every scar and old injury protest the movement. He'd cleaned up as best he could, trimmed his beard, wore his good shirt, even ran a brush through his hair. But he still looked like what he was, a man who'd been half dead for 2 years and was only recently trying to remember how to live. The coach jerked to a stop outside the depot. The driver climbed down, muttering curses about the road, the heat, and the sorry state of his suspension. A couple of passengers disembarked, a traveling salesman Dalton recognized, and an older woman who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. Then the door opened again. Dalton's breath caught. The photograph hadn't lied exactly, but it hadn't told the whole truth either. Serena Vale was beautiful in a way that made his chest hurt. Not the obvious kind of pretty that turned heads in saloons, but something quieter, deeper. Dark hair pinned up under a simple gray bonnet, pale skin that spoke of eastern cities and indoor life, a traveling dress that had probably been fine once but was now dusty and wrinkled from the journey. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold. They weren't looking at him. They were sweeping across the street, the buildings, the people, with an intensity that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. She was searching for something, or watching for it. Her hand gripped her small travel bag like it was the only thing keeping her anchored to the earth. When her gaze finally landed on him, she went still. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she stepped down from the coach, and Dalton saw her hands were shaking. He closed the distance between them, feeling awkward and too big and absolutely certain this was a mistake. "Miss Vale?" "Mr. Reeves." Her voice was softer than he'd expected, with an accent that placed her somewhere back east. Boston, maybe. New York. Somewhere a long way from Wyoming. "Thank you for meeting me. Wasn't going to make you walk." He reached for her bag, and she flinched. Actually flinched. Dalton froze, his hand hanging in the air between them. Her face went carefully blank, and she handed over the bag with a small, brittle smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Apologies," she said. "The journey was longer than I anticipated. I'm afraid I'm not quite myself." That was a lie. Dalton had spent enough time around frightened animals to recognize the signs. The way she held herself, spine straight, shoulders back, but ready to bolt at the first wrong move. The way her eyes kept drifting past him to check the street. The way she positioned herself so her back wasn't to the open road. She wasn't tired from the journey. She was terrified. "Got a wagon just down the street," he said, keeping his voice level. "Ranch is about an hour's ride. We can get you settled before dark." "That would be appreciated." The walk to the wagon was silent, except for the crunch of their boots on the packed dirt. Dalton was acutely aware of people watching. Not many, but enough. Red Hollow Ridge wasn't so small that a stranger caused a riot, but a mail-order bride was still worth a look. He saw Mrs. Patterson whispering to her daughter behind the bakery window. Saw Old Man Garrett tip his hat with a knowing grin. Dalton helped Serena up onto the wagon seat, trying not to notice how she arranged her skirts to keep the maximum distance between them, how she sat on the very edge like she might need to jump clear at any second. He climbed up beside her and took the reins. "You hungry? We can stop by the restaurant if you want a meal before we head out." "No, thank you. I'd prefer to see the ranch." "Suit yourself." The wagon lurched into motion, and Dalton guided the horses out of town, heading west toward the open country where his land began. The silence stretched between them, heavy and uncomfortable. He wasn't much for conversation on the best of days, but this felt different. Wrong. Like she was waiting for something bad to happen. After about 10 minutes, he couldn't stand it anymore. "Long trip from Pennsylvania?" She went very still. "I didn't mention Pennsylvania in my letters." "No, but your return address did." "Ah." A pause. "Yes, it was quite long." "You get sick on the train?" "No." "Stagecoach?" "No." Another silence. Dalton cleared his throat. "Look, Miss Vale, I'm not much good at small talk, but if this arrangement is going to work, we should probably be able to have a conversation." She turned to look at him then, really look at him, and he saw something shift in her expression. Not quite trust, but maybe the beginning of it. "You're right, I apologize. I'm being rude." "Didn't say that. You're thinking it." "I'm thinking you look like you're about to jump off this wagon and run." Her hands twisted in her lap. "I'm not going to run." "Didn't say you were. Just said you look like you might want to." For a long moment she didn't respond. Then, so quietly he almost missed it. "Would you stop me if I did?" The question hit him harder than it should have. Dalton kept his eyes on the road ahead, on the mountains rising purple in the distance, on the familiar landscape that had been his prison and refuge for 2 years. "No," he said finally. "No, I wouldn't stop you. You're free to leave any time you want. This isn't a trap, Miss Vale. You don't owe me anything. The arrangement can be unmade just as easy as it was made. I paid for your ticket out here, and if you decide this isn't what you want, I'll pay for your ticket back, or wherever else you want to go." She studied him for so long he started to feel uncomfortable. "Why did you send for a bride, Mr. Reeves? House needs a woman's touch. Ranch needs help. I'm not getting any younger." The rehearsed answer came out flat and unconvincing. "Those are practical reasons." "It's a practical arrangement." "Is it?" Dalton risked a glance at her and found her watching him with those dark, intelligent eyes. There was something knowing in her expression, something that saw straight through his bullshit. He looked away. "My wife died 2 years ago. Ranch has been going to hell ever since. I can manage the cattle and the land, but the house, the things she used to handle, I'm not good at it. Thought maybe a partnership made sense. Someone to help run things. Someone to..." He trailed off, not sure how to finish that sentence. "Someone to make the loneliness bearable?" His hands tightened on the reins. "Yeah, something like that. That's honest, at least." "Try to be." She looked away, out at the rolling grassland dotted with sage and the occasional twisted juniper. "I can cook, clean, manage a household. I'm reasonably good with accounts. I can sew, though not fancy work. I've helped with livestock before, though I'm better with chickens than cattle. I don't have expectations of anything beyond what was outlined in our correspondence." The way she said that last part, careful, measured, made Dalton's stomach clench. We'll figure out the details as we go. No rush. Of course. They rode in silence for a while longer. The town had disappeared behind them, swallowed by distance and the curve of the land. Out here, it was just the two of them and the empty country stretching in every direction. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of dust and distant rain. Above them, a hawk circled lazily, riding the thermals. It's very open, Serena said finally. That bother you? I'm not sure yet. I've spent most of my life in cities. Boston, mostly. Then Philadelphia for a time. This is quite different. You'll get used to it. Or you won't. He glanced at her. That the place you're running from? Philadelphia? Her whole body went rigid. I'm not… Yes, you are. He kept his voice gentle but firm. And I'm not asking you to tell me why. Not yet. Maybe not ever if you don't want to. But don't insult me by pretending. I've seen enough scared people to recognize the look. For a moment he thought she might deny it again. Then her shoulders sagged slightly, and she looked down at her hands. Is it that obvious? To me, yeah. To most folks, probably not. They'll just think you're skittish about the arrangement. Meeting a stranger, moving west, that's normal enough. And you don't think I'm just skittish about those things? I think you're skittish about a hell of a lot more than that. She was quiet for so long he figured she wasn't going to respond. Then, will you tell anyone? About what? You being scared? Not my business to tell. Even though your past is your past, Miss Vale. You want to share it? That's your choice. You want to keep it locked up? That's your choice too. All I care about is whether you can help run the ranch and whether you'll stick around long enough to make the arrangement work. And if I can't promise the second part? Dalton shrugged. Then we'll deal with that when it happens. Like I said, you're free to leave whenever you want. She looked at him again with that penetrating gaze. You're not what I expected, Mr. Reeves. Yeah, well, you're not exactly what I expected either. In what way? Expected someone more… He searched for the word. Ordinary, I guess. Someone looking for a quiet life because they wanted quiet, not because they needed it. And now you think I need it? I think whatever you're running from, you're hoping it can't find you out here. He met her eyes. And maybe it can't. This is about as close to the edge of the world as you can get without falling off. Not many people come looking out here unless they're already lost. That's a rather bleak way of putting it. It's true, though. She turned back to the landscape, and something in her posture eased slightly. Perhaps it is. The ranch came into view as they crested a low rise, a weathered house, a barn that had seen better days, a cluster of outbuildings in various states of disrepair. Fences that needed mending stretched out into the distance, marking pastures where a few dozen cattle grazed. It wasn't much, and Dalton saw it through her eyes, isolated, worn down, lonely as hell. It needs work, he said, defensive despite himself. Yes, she agreed, it does. Cattle are good, land's good, just the structures that need attention. I can see that. He pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house and climbed down, then moved to help her. This time, she didn't flinch when he offered his hand, though he felt her tense as his fingers closed around hers. Her hand was small, soft, despite what she'd said about ranch work. City hands, hands that hadn't seen hard labor in a while. I'll show you inside, he said, releasing her as soon as she was steady on the ground. It's not… I haven't been keeping it up like I should. Fair warning. I understand. He wasn't sure she did until he opened the door. The house smelled stale and unused, despite the fact that he lived in it. Dust covered most surfaces. Dishes were piled in the wash basin. His boots and work clothes were scattered across the floor. The parlor, what Elizabeth had called the parlor, anyway, was dark and cold, the furniture covered with old sheets like ghosts. Serena stepped inside slowly, taking it all in. Her expression didn't change, but Dalton felt the judgment anyway. He'd let the place go to hell. He knew it. Had known it for months, but couldn't seem to care enough to do anything about it. The kitchen's through there, he said, gesturing. Bedroom's upstairs. There's a room on the ground floor I use now. Easier, you can have your pick of the upstairs rooms. You don't use the main bedroom? No. Why not? Just don't. She looked at him for a moment, then nodded. May I see the upstairs? Go ahead, I'll bring your bag in. She climbed the stairs slowly, one hand trailing along the banister. Dalton watched her go, then hauled her bag inside and set it by the door. He needed to do something with his hands, needed to move, so he started gathering up the scattered clothes and dishes, feeling awkward and exposed. By the time she came back down, he had the worst of it cleared away. "There are 4 bedrooms," she said. "One of them is locked." His hand stilled on the counter. "Yeah. May I ask why?" "It was my wife's room, our room. I locked it after she died. Haven't opened it since." "I see." She paused. "Is that the room I shouldn't take?" "You can have any of the other 3. That one stays locked." "Of course." She moved to the kitchen, running a finger along the dusty counter, opening cabinets to see what supplies existed. Dalton watched her work through the space, methodical and thorough. She didn't comment on the mess, didn't wrinkle her nose at the smell or the state of things. Just assessed. "I'll need supplies from town," she said finally. "Cleaning supplies mainly. Some of the food stores are adequate, but we'll need fresh vegetables, eggs, milk. The stove needs cleaning before I can use it properly. The windows need washing. The floors need scrubbing. I can take you to town tomorrow. Get whatever you need." "That would be helpful." She turned to face him, and some of the fear had left her eyes, replaced by something more practical. "I'd like to start today, if that's acceptable. I won't sleep well in a house this unkempt." Despite everything, Dalton felt a small smile tug at his mouth. "You sound like Elizabeth." "Your wife?" "Yeah, she couldn't stand mess. Always had to have everything just so." Serena's expression softened slightly. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mr. Reeves." "Dalton, if we're going to be living under the same roof, might as well use first names." "Then you should call me Serena." "All right." He shifted his weight, uncomfortable with the intimacy of it. "I'll get you some water from the well. You want help with anything else?" "No, I'll manage. I'd prefer to work alone if you don't mind. It helps me think." "Suit yourself. I've got work in the barn. You need me. Just holler." He left her there in the kitchen and escaped to the barn, where things made sense and didn't require conversation or vulnerability. The horses needed tending, the tack needed mending, the whole structure needed repairs he'd been putting off for months. He threw himself into the work, trying not to think about the woman in his house. His house. Not theirs. Not yet. Trying not to wonder what she was running from or whether it would find her here. The sun was setting by the time he finished with the horses and the most urgent repairs. He'd lost track of time, working through the afternoon in the familiar rhythm of physical labor. His hands were sore, his back aching, but his mind felt clearer than it had in days. When he walked back to the house, he could smell something cooking. He paused on the porch, caught off guard. It had been 2 years since this house had smelled like food, like someone living in it instead of just existing. He pushed open the door and stopped. The kitchen was transformed, not spotless, that would have been impossible in a few hours, but clean. The dishes were washed and put away. The counters were scrubbed. The floor had been swept. The stove was lit, and a pot was bubbling on top of it, filling the room with the smell of something that made his stomach growl. Serena was at the counter, her sleeves rolled up, her hair slightly mussed from work. She'd found an apron somewhere and tied it around her waist. She looked up when he entered, and for a moment they just stared at each other. "I found some beans and salt pork," she said, "and there were potatoes in the cellar that were still good. It's not much, but it's edible. Smells good. It's simple. I've been eating out of cans for 2 years. Simple's an improvement." Something that might have been a smile flickered across her face. "You should wash up. Dinner will be ready soon." Dalton did as he was told, scrubbing the worst of the dirt from his hands and face at the pump outside. When he came back in, she'd set the small kitchen table with 2 plates, 2 forks, 2 cups. It looked almost normal, almost like a home. They ate in silence, the only sound the scrape of utensils on plates. The food was good, better than good. She'd seasoned it somehow, made something decent out of the meager supplies he'd let dwindle to nothing. "You're a good cook," he said finally. "Thank you. My mother insisted I learn." "She back in Boston?" "Philadelphia." Serena's face closed off slightly. "She died 3 years ago." "I'm sorry." "So am I." Another silence. Dalton finished eating and pushed his plate away. "What about your father?" Her jaw tightened. "I'd rather not discuss my father." "All right. Or my family, if we're being honest. There are Reasons I left. Reasons I'd prefer not to revisit. Fair enough. Like I said, your past is your business. She looked at him, and some of the tension in her shoulders eased. Thank you. They cleaned up together, falling into an awkward rhythm of washing and drying. Dalton was acutely aware of how small the kitchen was, how close they were standing, how domestic this all felt despite the fact that they were essentially strangers. I'll sleep in the downstairs room, he said when they finished. You take whichever bedroom you want upstairs. There's linens in the closet at the end of the hall. Might be dusty, but they're clean. Thank you. I saw them earlier. Right. Well, I'll be up early. Cat'll need checking. You don't have to get up with me if you don't want. I'm an early riser by nature. I don't mind. Suit yourself. They stood there for a moment, neither quite sure how to end the evening. Finally, Serena took a small step back. Good night, Dalton. Good night, Serena. He watched her climb the stairs, then retreated to his room, the small one off the kitchen that he'd moved into after Elizabeth died because he couldn't stand sleeping upstairs anymore. It was barely big enough for a bed and a chest of drawers, but it was his space. Safe. Contained. He lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of someone else moving around in his house. Footsteps overhead, the creak of a door, water running, then silence. He'd done a fool thing, bringing a stranger into his home. A beautiful, terrified stranger who was clearly running from something bad. The smart move would be to send her back, pay her passage, wish her well, cut his losses before he got attached. But even as he thought it, he knew he wouldn't. Because when she'd looked at him outside the depot, when he'd seen that raw fear in her eyes, something in him had shifted. Some part of him that had been dead for 2 years had woken up just enough to care whether she lived or died, whether she found safety or kept running forever. He was going to protect her, even if it was stupid, even if it got him killed. Okay. The next few days fell into a pattern. Dalton rose before dawn, checked the cattle, mended fences, handled the endless work that came with running a ranch alone. Serena woke with him, made breakfast, then threw herself into cleaning the house with a determination that bordered on manic. She didn't talk much, didn't ask questions, just worked. By the end of the first week, the downstairs was unrecognizable. She'd scrubbed every surface, washed every window, beaten every rug. The house smelled like lye soap and vinegar instead of stale air and old grief. She'd even tackled the parlor, removing the sheets from the furniture, dusting the mantel where Elizabeth's things still sat untouched. Dalton had walked in one evening to find her standing in front of the fireplace, holding a small porcelain figurine. A shepherdess Elizabeth had loved. Serena's expression had been distant, almost sad, and she'd set it down carefully when she noticed him watching. "I'm sorry," she'd said. "I shouldn't have touched it. It's fine. They're just things. They were hers." "Yeah." She'd looked at him for a long moment. "Do you want me to cover them again?" He'd almost said yes, almost told her to put the sheets back, to leave Elizabeth's memory undisturbed. But something stopped him. "No, it's time they saw daylight again." A small nod. Then she'd gone back to work. They'd driven to town twice for supplies, once for cleaning materials, once for food and household goods. Both times, Dalton had noticed how she positioned herself in the wagon, always watching the road behind them, how she tensed when they passed other travelers, how she kept her face turned away when they encountered anyone in town. She was expecting someone, waiting for them, waiting. On the 8th day, Dalton found her in the chicken coop he'd neglected for months. She'd cleaned it out, repaired the fence, and was scattering feed for the half-dozen scraggly birds that had somehow survived his neglect. "Didn't know we still had chickens," he said from the doorway. She jumped, whirling around with wide eyes before recognition set in. "You startled me." "Sorry, didn't mean to. It's all right." She turned back to the birds. "There were 6 when I found them. They'd been roosting in the hayloft. I coaxed them down with feed. That where the eggs have been coming from." "Yes, they're not laying much. They're stressed and underfed, but I'm working on it. With proper care, we should have a decent supply within a month or so." Dalton leaned against the doorframe, watching her work. She moved with easy competence around the birds, talking to them softly, checking them for mites and injury. She'd said she was better with chickens than cattle, and he could see it was true. "You've done a lot in a week," he said. "The house needed it." "Yeah, but you didn't have to do it all at once. You've been working yourself half to death. She straightened, brushing dust from her skirt. I prefer to stay busy. Why? It keeps my mind occupied. From what? Her hand stilled on the feed bucket. For a moment he thought she might actually answer. Then she set the bucket down and walked past him out of the coop. I should start dinner. He caught her arm gently as she passed. She froze, and he felt her pulse hammering under his fingers. Serena, whatever you're afraid of, I'm not afraid. You don't have to face it alone. That's what this arrangement is for, isn't it? Partnership? She pulled her arm free, not roughly, but firmly. You don't know what you're offering. Then tell me. I can't. Can't or won't. Her eyes flashed with something, anger maybe, or frustration. Does it matter? Yeah, it does. If you can't tell me because someone's threatening you, that's one thing. If you won't tell me because you don't trust me, that's another. I barely know you. You've been living in my house for over a week, cooking my meals, cleaning my home. That's more than barely knowing someone. That's domestic labor, not intimacy. The words stung more than they should have. Dalton stepped back, shoving his hands in his pockets. Right, my mistake. He turned to leave, but her voice stopped him. Dalton, wait. He paused, but didn't turn around. I didn't mean it like that, she said quietly. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to trust people anymore. Every time I think I can, something happens to prove I shouldn't. He looked back at her. She was standing in the dusty yard, arms wrapped around herself, looking smaller and more vulnerable than he'd ever seen her. The afternoon sun caught her hair, turning it almost black, and her face was pale and drawn. Not everyone's out to hurt you, he said. I know that. Intellectually, I know that. But knowing it and feeling it are different things. So what are you asking me to do? Keep my distance? Pretend we're just employer and employee? I don't know what I'm asking. Her voice cracked slightly. I just know I'm not ready to share everything. Not yet. Dalton studied her for a long moment, weighing his options. He could push, demand answers, tell her that if she wanted his protection, she owed him the truth. But looking at her face, at the exhaustion and fear written in every line of her body, he couldn't do it. All right, he said finally. But when you are ready, if you ever are, I'm here. And whatever it is, whatever you did or whoever's after you, it doesn't change the arrangement. You've got a place here as long as you want it. She blinked rapidly, and he realized with horror that she was fighting tears. Why would you say that? You don't even know. Don't have to know. I've seen enough to figure you're running from something bad, and I've seen enough of how you work, how you care for things, to know you're not a bad person. That's enough for me. A tear escaped, tracking down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly, almost angrily. You're either very kind or very stupid. Been called both. Which is it? Don't know yet. Ask me in a month. Despite everything, she almost smiled. All right. They stood there for a moment in the fading light, two damaged people trying to figure out how to exist in the same space without breaking each other. Then Serena took a shaky breath and straightened her shoulders. I should really start dinner, she said. Need help? No, but thank you. She walked back to the house, and Dalton watched her go, feeling like he'd just fought a battle he didn't fully understand. He'd meant what he said. She could stay as long as she wanted, secrets and all. But part of him knew that couldn't last forever. Eventually, whatever she was running from would catch up. And when it did, he'd have to decide whether he was brave enough or stupid enough to stand between her and it. 2 more weeks passed. The house continued to transform. Serena had moved on from cleaning to actual improvements. Mending curtains, organizing the pantry, even starting a small vegetable garden behind the house. She worked from dawn until well after dark, and Dalton started to wonder if she ever actually slept. He tried to help when he could, but ranch work kept him busy from sunrise to sunset. Cattle had broken through a fence and scattered across the south pasture. The well pump needed replacing. One of the barn walls was rotting and had to be rebuilt before winter. Still, he made sure to eat every meal with her. Breakfast and dinner, always together at the small kitchen table. It became the anchor of his day. The one time he could watch her without seeming like he was watching her, could ask casual questions and sometimes get actual answers. He learned she'd grown up wealthy, learned she spoke French and had been educated at a finishing school in Boston, learned she played piano but hadn't touched one in years. learned she hated thunder but loved rain, preferred coffee to tea, and could recite poetry in 3 languages. He told her about the ranch, about growing up in Wyoming, about his father who'd built this place from nothing, and his mother who died when he was 12. Told her about serving in the war, though not much about what he'd seen there, and about coming home to find everything familiar and strange at the same time. He didn't tell her about Elizabeth, about how she'd died, about the locked room upstairs that sometimes he could still hear her voice coming from, even though he knew it was just the wind and his own guilt. And Serena didn't ask. It was the closest thing to comfortable he'd felt in 2 years. Then, on a Thursday afternoon 3 weeks after her arrival, everything changed. Dalton had ridden into town for supplies, salt for the cattle, nails for the repairs he was doing on the barn. He'd left Serena at the ranch with a rifle and instructions to shoot anyone who came around that she didn't know. He hadn't expected her to need them. He was loading the last of the supplies into the wagon when Marshal Tucker appeared at his elbow. "Reeves, got a minute?" Dalton secured the last bag and turned. "What's up?" "Stranger came through yesterday. Well-dressed fellow, expensive horse, city type. Was asking questions about newcomers to the area, specifically women traveling alone." Dalton's blood went cold. "What'd you tell him?" "Nothing. Told him we get plenty of travelers through and I don't keep track of every single one." Tucker's eyes were sharp. But he was persistent, offered money for information. "Did anyone take it?" Don't think so. Most folks around here don't trust strangers throwing money around. Makes them nervous." He paused. "But he's still in town, staying at the hotel, and he's the type who doesn't give up easy." "What's he look like?" "Tall, dark hair going gray at the temples, scar on his left cheek, talks like he's used to people doing what he says. Carries himself like someone who knows how to handle trouble." Serena's face flashed through Dalton's mind. The fear in her eyes that first day, the way she still flinched at unexpected sounds, the way she watched the road. "He have a name?" "Called himself Victor Hale. Mean anything to you?" "No." The lie came easily. He had no idea if that was the name of whoever was after Serena, but he wasn't about to confirm anything. "Should it?" Tucker studied him for a long moment. "Your mail-order bride, she come from back east?" "That's not your business." "It is if she's trouble." "She's not trouble." "Then why's a man like that looking for her?" "Don't know that he is." "Could be looking for anyone." "Could be." Tucker didn't sound convinced. "But if he's not, and if he finds what he's looking for, I don't want it causing problems in my town." "It won't." "See that it doesn't." Dalton climbed into the wagon, his mind racing. He needed to get back to the ranch, needed to warn Serena, needed to figure out what the hell to do if this Victor Hale came knocking. The ride home felt twice as long as usual. He pushed the horses harder than he should have, earning annoyed snorts and head tosses, but he didn't care. The sun was starting to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, and all he could think about was whether Serena was safe. The ranch came into view, and everything looked normal. Smoke rose from the chimney. The chickens were scratching in their yard, no strange horses, no sign of trouble. Dalton pulled the wagon up to the house and jumped down, taking the porch steps 2 at a time. He burst through the door and found Serena standing at the kitchen counter with a knife in her hand, breathing hard, her face white as chalk. "What happened?" he demanded. "Nothing. She set the knife down carefully. "You startled me." "Like hell. You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine." "Serena, I said I'm fine." The words came out sharper than she'd probably intended. She closed her eyes, took a breath. "I'm sorry. I was just preparing vegetables for dinner. The knife slipped. You came in at the wrong moment." It was a lie. A bad one. But before he could call her on it, she turned away, busying herself with the cutting board in a way that made it clear the conversation was over. Dalton forced himself to breathe. Getting angry wouldn't help. "Someone came to town yesterday. Man named Victor Hale. Tall, dark hair, scar on his cheek. He was asking about newcomers, about women traveling alone." The knife clattered against the cutting board. Serena's hands were shaking so badly she had to set it down. Did anyone tell him about me?" "No, not yet, but he's still in town and Tucker says he's the persistent type." "How long before he finds out?" Don't know. Could be today. Could be next week. Could be never, if he gives up and moves on. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. He won't give up. He never gives up. So it is him, the person you're running from. One of them, yes. Who is he? Serena turned to face him, and the look in her eyes was pure desperation. He works for my father, or rather, for the family my father sold me to. His job is to find me and bring me back so they can complete the arrangement my father made before he died. What kind of arrangement? The kind that doesn't care whether the bride is willing. Her voice was bitter. I was promised to Marcus Ashford when I was 18. The marriage was supposed to happen when I turned 21. But my mother was sick, dying, and I convinced them to wait. Then she died, and my father lost everything in bad investments. And suddenly the Ashfords weren't so interested in a bride with no dowry. So my father, he offered them something else, something I could provide even without money. Dalton felt sick. What? Connections. My mother's family is very well placed in Philadelphia society. Access to them, to their businesses, their political influence, that's what he sold. And I was the key to maintaining those relationships after he died. So the Ashfords agreed to the marriage after all, with new terms. Terms that didn't give me any choice in the matter. So you ran. 3 days before the wedding, I took what money I had, bought a train ticket west, and disappeared. She wrapped her arms around herself. Victor Hale is the Ashfords' head of security. He's been looking for me for 8 months. I thought if I came far enough, changed my name, became someone else, they'd give up. But they haven't. Why not? There are other women they could marry into those connections. Because I embarrassed them, because I made them look foolish, because Marcus Ashford doesn't like being told no. Her jaw tightened. And because if I can run and get away with it, other women might try the same thing. I'm an example, Dalton. They'll chase me to the ends of the earth if they have to, just to prove a point. Dalton stared at her, processing this. It was worse than he'd thought. Not a simple bad engagement, but something systematic. Predatory. The kind of thing that had power and money behind it. The kind of thing that didn't stop just because someone asked nicely. All right, he said finally. She blinked. All right? All right. He's looking for you, so we make sure he doesn't find you. Or if he does, we make sure he doesn't take you back. You don't understand. Victor Hale is dangerous. He's not just some hired thug. He's smart, he's connected, and he has no moral boundaries. If you get in his way, then I get in his way. That's what we're doing here, isn't it? Partnership, protecting each other. I never asked you to. Didn't have to ask. You're under my roof, which makes you my responsibility. And I'm not letting some rich bastard's pet enforcer drag you back east to marry someone you don't want to marry. So we figure this out together. Serena stared at him, and for a moment he thought she might argue. Then something in her face crumpled, and she covered it with her hands. I'm so tired of running. He moved without thinking, crossing the space between them and pulling her into his arms. She went rigid for a second, then collapsed against him, her whole body shaking with silent sobs. He held her awkwardly, not sure what to do with his hands, settling for one on her back and one on her hair. You don't have to run anymore, he said quietly. Not from here. This is your home now if you want it, and anyone who wants to take you from it is going to have to go through me first. She made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. You barely know me. Know enough. You're insane. Been told that before. She pulled back slightly, looking up at him with red-rimmed eyes. Why would you do this? Risk everything for a stranger? Dalton hesitated, trying to find words for something he didn't fully understand himself. My wife died in that locked room upstairs. She was pregnant, and there were complications, and I couldn't save her, couldn't protect her. I've lived with that for 2 years, knowing I failed the one person I was supposed to keep safe. So maybe this is me trying to make up for that. Or maybe I just don't want to fail twice. Either way, I'm not letting you go without a fight. Serena's eyes were wide, searching his face for something. Then, slowly she reached up and touched his cheek. Just a brief touch, her fingers cool against his skin. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We don't know what's going to happen. No, but we'll face it together? Yeah, together. She stepped back, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. What do we do now? Now? Now we wait. See if he shows up. If he does, I'll handle it. How? Don't know yet, but I'll figure something out. Victor Hale showed up 3 days later. Dalton was in the barn when he heard the horse, too refined to be one of the local ranch hands, too confident to be a lost traveler. He set down the bridle he'd been mending and walked to the barn door, one hand resting casually on the rifle he'd started carrying everywhere. The rider was exactly as Tucker had described. Tall, well-dressed, sitting his horse like a man who'd been born in the saddle but preferred a carriage. Dark hair with silver at the temples, a scar running from his left cheekbone to his jaw, cold eyes that took in everything and gave away nothing. "Help you?" Dalton called out. The man dismounted with practiced ease. "Good afternoon. I'm looking for the owner of this property." "You found him. Dalton Reeves." "Victor Hale." He extended a hand which Dalton ignored. Hale's smile didn't waver. "I was hoping you might help me with a matter I'm looking into." "Depends on the matter." "I'm searching for a young woman. Mid-20s, dark hair, pale complexion. She may be traveling alone or may have sought employment in the area. I'm willing to pay for information." "Don't know her." "You haven't heard the description yet." "Don't need to. I don't know any young women matching any description. Town's a few miles east if you want to ask around there." Hale's eyes narrowed slightly. "I've already been to town. Several of the locals mentioned you'd recently taken on a mail-order bride, a woman from back east." "My personal business isn't up for discussion." "Of course. I'm simply trying to eliminate possibilities. The woman I'm searching for is quite distinctive, educated, refined manner of speaking. She may be using a false name." "Like I said, can't help you." "Mr. Reeves." Hale's voice took on a harder edge. "The woman I'm looking for is betrothed to a very important man. Her family is extremely concerned for her welfare. If you're harboring her, I'm not harboring anyone. I've got a wife who came out here legally through a marriage broker. If that's a problem for you, take it up with the territorial court. I think perhaps I should speak with your wife directly, confirm her identity." "That's not happening." "I'm afraid I must insist." Dalton shifted his weight slightly, bringing the rifle into clearer view without actually pointing it. "And I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to leave my property." For a long moment, they stared at each other. Hale's expression never changed, but Dalton could see the calculation happening behind those cold eyes, weighing options, assessing threats. Finally, Hale smiled, a thin, mirthless expression. "Of course. I apologize for the intrusion. However, I will be in the area for some time, continuing my search. If you should happen to encounter the woman I'm looking for, I'd appreciate notification. There's a substantial reward for information leading to her safe return. If I see her, I'll be sure to let you know." Another smile. "I'm sure you will." Hale mounted his horse with the same fluid grace he'd dismounted. He tipped his hat mockingly and turned the animal back toward the road. Dalton watched him ride away, not moving until the dust cloud had disappeared completely. Then he went back into the house. Serena was standing at the window, white-knuckled hands gripping the curtain. "He knows I'm here." "Maybe. Maybe not." "You heard him. He knew about the mail-order bride. Knowing I sent for a bride and knowing you're that bride are two different things. I didn't confirm anything." "He'll be back?" "Probably." She turned to look at him, and her face was drawn with fear. "What are we going to do?" "What we're doing now. Stay here. Stay safe. Let him search all he wants. He won't find proof you're the woman he's looking for unless we give it to him." "And if he doesn't need proof? If he just takes me?" "Then he'll have to get through me first." "Dalton, you can't fight him. He'll have the law on his side. He'll claim I'm a runaway fiancé, that you're helping me break a legal contract. There's no legal contract forcing a woman to marry against her will. Not even back east." "You don't know the Ashfords. They have lawyers, judges, politicians in their pockets. They can make anything legal if they throw enough money at it." Dalton crossed to her, taking her shoulders gently. "Listen to me. You're my wife in the eyes of everyone in this territory. We've got papers from the marriage broker. You're living here, working here, building a life here. That's real. Whatever arrangement your father made, it's not enforceable out here. This is Wyoming, not Pennsylvania. Different laws, different world. But no buts, you're staying. He's leaving. And if he doesn't like it, that's his problem." She searched his face, looking for doubt, for hesitation. Whatever she found there must have satisfied her because she leaned forward slightly, resting her forehead against his chest. "I don't know what I did to deserve you." "Probably nothing. I'm not that great." You're braver than you think. Or dumber. She laughed softly, the sound muffled against his shirt. Maybe both. They stood there for a while, neither moving, until Serena finally pulled back. I should finish dinner. Yeah, and I should check the cattle. Neither of them moved. Dalton? Yeah? Thank you for not giving me up. Wasn't even a question. It should have been. You don't owe me anything. Maybe not, but I'm doing it anyway. She looked at him for a long moment, then rose on her toes and kissed his cheek, brief and chaste, but enough to make his heart stutter. You're a good man. Then she was gone, back to the kitchen, leaving him standing in the parlor feeling like the floor had shifted under his feet. He'd promised to protect her. He'd meant it. But standing there with the ghost of her kiss still warm on his skin, Dalton realized he'd already crossed a line he hadn't meant to cross. He was starting to care about her as more than just a responsibility, and that was going to make everything a hell of a lot more complicated. Victor Hale didn't leave town. Dalton heard about it from the general store clerk when he went in for supplies 4 days later. The man was still at the hotel, still asking questions, still throwing money around like it grew on trees. He'd bought drinks at the saloon, paid for dinners at the restaurant, charmed half the women in town with that practiced Eastern smile. And he was getting closer to the truth. Mrs. Patterson said he asked about you specifically, the clerk said as he wrapped Dalton's order in brown paper. Wanted to know how long you'd been alone, whether anyone had seen your new wife, what she looked like. Dalton kept his face neutral. What'd she tell him? Said she hadn't seen the woman up close, which is true enough. Your wife hasn't been to town since she arrived, has she? Been busy settling in. Right. The clerk leaned closer, lowering his voice. Look, Reeves, I don't know what's going on, and it's not my business. But that fellow, he's not the type to give up. Whatever he wants, he's going to get it or die trying. Just thought you should know. Appreciate it. Dalton loaded the supplies into the wagon and headed back to the ranch, his mind churning. Hale wasn't going away. Every day he stayed in Red Hollow Ridge was another day closer to someone slipping up, saying too much, confirming what he already suspected. They needed a plan. When he got back to the ranch, Serena was in the garden, coaxing vegetables from the hard Wyoming soil with a determination that bordered on obsessive. She'd been like that since Hale's visit, working constantly, sleeping little, jumping at every sound. The fear was eating her alive from the inside out. He's still in town, Dalton said without preamble, her hand stilled on the tomato plant she'd been staking. For how long? Don't know, but he's asking questions about you, about us, getting specific. Then I should leave. She stood abruptly, brushing dirt from her skirt. If I'm gone, he'll have no reason to bother you. I can take the train west, go to California maybe, or... No. Dalton. I said no. He climbed down from the wagon, facing her across the rows of newly planted vegetables. You running again doesn't solve anything. He'll just follow you wherever you go. At least here, you've got someone watching your back. And what happens when he proves I'm the woman he's looking for? When he shows up with some legal document or a marshal who's been paid off? You can't protect me from that. Maybe not, but I can make it hard enough that he decides it's not worth the trouble. She laughed bitterly. You don't know Marcus Ashford. Pride means more to him than money, and he's got plenty of both. He won't stop just because it's difficult. Then we make it impossible. Dalton pulled off his hat, running a hand through his hair. Look, I've been thinking, if Hale's whole case is based on you being the runaway bride, then we need to prove you're not. We need to make you legally, undeniably my wife. Not just a mail-order arrangement, but a real marriage. Serena went very still. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we get married. Properly. In front of a judge or a minister, with witnesses, with all the legal paperwork that makes it binding. Once that's done, you're not Serena Vale from Philadelphia anymore. You're Serena Reeves of Wyoming, and no contract from back east can touch you. That's a huge step. It's a practical solution. Is it? She crossed her arms, her expression unreadable. Or is it you trying to play hero again? The words stung more than they should have. If that's what you think, I don't know what I think. She turned away, staring out at the mountains. 3 weeks ago, I was a stranger stepping off a stagecoach. Now you're proposing marriage to protect me from a man you've never met, from a situation you don't fully understand. It's insane, Dalton. Yeah, well, seems to be my specialty lately. You could get hurt, or worse. The Ashfords don't play fair, and neither does Victor Hale. If you stand in their way, I'm already standing in their way. Have been since I lied to Hale's face and told him I didn't know you. Marrying you doesn't change the danger, it just gives us better legal ground to fight from. She was quiet for a long time, and Dalton waited, watching the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands twisted together. Finally, she spoke without turning around. What about you? What about me? You'd be bound to me, legally, permanently. You'd be giving up any chance of finding someone you chose. I did choose. I sent for a mail-order bride, remember? That's not the same thing. Close enough. He moved closer, stopping just behind her. Serena, I'm not looking for some grand romance. Elizabeth she was it for me. That part of my life is over. This is different. This is partnership, like we agreed. Two people helping each other survive. If making it legal keeps you safe, then that's what we do. She turned then, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. You deserve more than that. So do you. But we work with what we've got, right? This isn't fair to you. Life's not fair. We both know that. He held her gaze. I'm offering this because I want to. Because you've worked harder in 3 weeks than most people work in 3 months. Because you've made this house feel like a home again instead of a tomb. And because when I look at you, I don't see someone who needs rescuing. I see someone who's already survived hell and came out the other side. That's worth protecting. A tear escaped, sliding down her cheek. You barely know me. Then we'll get to know each other. We've got time. Do we? What if Hale doesn't give up? What if he... Then we deal with it. Together. Dalton reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and wiped the tear from her cheek with his thumb. I'm not promising this will be easy. I'm not promising I'll be a good husband. I wasn't great at it the first time around. But I can promise I'll do everything in my power to keep you safe. That's something, isn't it? Serena closed her eyes, leaning into his touch for just a moment. When she opened them again, there was a resolve there that hadn't been before. All right. All right. I'll marry you. Properly. Legally. Whatever it takes to make this stick. She managed a shaky smile. But you're going to regret this, Dalton Reeves. I'm not an easy person to live with. Good thing I'm not either, then. They stood there at the garden, the afternoon sun beating down on them. Two broken people agreeing to glue their pieces together and hope the result was strong enough to withstand what was coming. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't even particularly hopeful. But it was real, and right then, that was enough. The next morning, they rode to town together. Serena wore her best dress, still travel-worn but clean, and Dalton had shaved and put on the suit he'd worn to Elizabeth's funeral. It felt wrong, wearing it for this, but it was the only decent thing he owned. The circuit judge was in town by sheer luck, hearing cases at the courthouse. Dalton and Serena waited outside his chambers for 2 hours, watching other petitioners come and go, until finally they were called in. Judge Harmon was a severe-looking man in his 60s with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. He looked up from the papers on his desk when they entered, and Dalton saw him take in every detail. Serena's nervous hands, Dalton's rigid posture, the way they stood just slightly too far apart to be comfortable. Mr. Reeves. Miss Vale, Serena said quietly. Serena Vale. You're here for a marriage license. Yes, sir. Harmon leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. How long have you known each other? 3 weeks, Dalton said. And you're certain about this? Yes, sir. Both of you? Serena lifted her chin. Yes. You understand this is a binding legal contract, not something to be entered into lightly or dissolved easily? We understand, Dalton said. The judge studied them for a long moment. I've been doing this for 20 years. I can usually tell when a couple's going to last and when they're making a mistake. You too. He shook his head. I can't get a read on you at all, but you're both of age, both consenting, and I don't have legal grounds to refuse. So I'll ask one more time. Are you absolutely certain? Yes, they said in unison. All right then. Harmon pulled out a form and began filling it in. I'll need both your signatures here, and we'll need 2 witnesses for the ceremony. You have anyone in mind? Dalton hadn't thought that far ahead. No, sir. We can pull a couple of people from the street if we have to. Won't be the first time. He finished the paperwork and looked up. The ceremony can be performed now if you'd like, or you can schedule it for later. Now, Serena said quickly, if that's possible. Harmon raised an eyebrow, but didn't comment. He stood and opened the door to his chambers, calling out to his clerk. Mr. Wilson, round up a couple witnesses, would you? We've got a wedding to perform. 10 minutes later, they were standing in front of Judge Harmon with two confused-looking witnesses, a lawyer who'd been waiting for his own case and Mrs. Chen, who ran the laundry service. The whole thing took less than 5 minutes. Harmon read the vows in a flat, business-like tone. Dalton and Serena repeated them. There was no ring, no kiss, no celebration, just the scratch of a pen on paper and Harmon's declaration that they were now legally married under the laws of the Wyoming territory. Congratulations, Harmon said dryly. Try not to kill each other. They walked out into the afternoon sunlight as husband and wife, and Dalton felt like he'd just jumped off a cliff without checking if there was water below. That was grim, Serena said as they climbed into the wagon. Yeah. Not exactly the wedding every girl dreams of. You dreaming of white dresses and church bells? She laughed, and it sounded only slightly hysterical. No, but I wasn't dreaming of a courthouse with borrowed witnesses either. Sorry it wasn't better. Don't be. It served its purpose. She looked down at her hands, now bare of any ring but carrying the weight of legal marriage. We're protected now, right? If Hale comes back? As protected as we can be. They rode back to the ranch in silence, and Dalton tried not to think about how this was supposed to be a celebration, how Elizabeth had been so happy on their wedding day, how wrong it felt to have done this with a woman who was essentially still a stranger. But when they got home and Serena climbed down from the wagon, she turned to him with an expression that was almost hopeful. Thank you for doing this. I know it wasn't easy. Nothing worth doing is. Still, you didn't have to. Yeah, I did. He secured the horses and followed her into the house. We're partners now. Officially. That means something. Does it? To me it does. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. To me, too. That night, they ate dinner in silence, the weight of what they'd done hanging between them. Afterward, Serena went upstairs to her room. She'd chosen the smallest one, the one farthest from the locked door, and Dalton retreated to his ground floor space. He lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, wondering what the hell he'd just committed himself to. He must have eventually fallen asleep because he woke to the sound of screaming. Dalton was on his feet and halfway up the stairs before his brain fully engaged. The screaming cut off abruptly, replaced by harsh, gasping sobs. He pounded on Serena's door. Serena, you all right? A choked sound that might have been yes came from inside. I'm coming in. He pushed open the door to find her sitting up in bed, sheets tangled around her legs, her face wet with tears. The lamp was lit, casting shadows across the small room. She looked at him with wild eyes, and for a moment she didn't seem to recognize him. It's me, he said quietly, staying in the doorway. Dalton, you're safe. You were dreaming. Recognition slowly filtered back into her expression. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to wake you. You were screaming. Was I? I don't remember. She wiped at her face with shaking hands. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. He took a cautious step into the room. You want to talk about it? No? Okay. He should leave, should give her privacy. But something about the way she was trembling, the way her breath was coming too fast, kept him rooted in place. You need anything? Water? Something to calm your nerves? No, I need a minute. All right. He turned to go. Dalton? He stopped. Would you mind staying just for a few minutes? I don't want to be alone right now. He should say no. Should maintain proper distance. Should remember this was a practical arrangement, nothing more. Instead, he pulled the chair from the corner and sat down, keeping a respectful distance from the bed. I'm here. She pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. It was the same dream I always have. The wedding that didn't happen. Except in the dream, it does happen. I'm standing at the altar, and Marcus is there, and everyone's watching, and I can't move, can't speak, can't run. I just have to stand there while they... She didn't finish, but she didn't have to. You're not there, Dalton said. You're here, with me. And nobody's making you do anything you don't want to do. I know that. Rationally, I know that. But in the dream, dreams don't have to make sense. No. She was quiet for a moment. Do you dream about her, your wife? The question caught him off guard. Sometimes. What do you dream about? Dalton leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling. He'd never talked about this with anyone, never wanted to. But sitting here in the lamplight with Serena still shaking from her own nightmares, it seemed wrong to refuse. I dream about the day she died. Except in the dream, I can save her. I do everything right. I get the doctor in time, I say the right things, and she lives. Then I wake up and remember that's not what happened. How did she die? Childbirth. The baby was breech, and there were complications. By the time I realized how bad it was too late. Doctor said even if he'd been there from the start, he probably couldn't have saved them. But I keep thinking, if I'd known more, if I'd done something different, it wasn't your fault. Yeah, well, tell that to my brain at 3 a.m. Serena was quiet for a long time. Then, is that why you locked the room? Couldn't stand to look at it. Everything in there reminded me of what I lost, so I locked it up and tried to pretend it didn't exist. He rubbed his face. Stupid, right? No, it's grief. Grief isn't stupid. Feels stupid sometimes. That doesn't make it less real. She shifted slightly, and the lamplight caught her face. The fear had faded, replaced by something softer. Thank you for telling me. You asked. I know, but you didn't have to answer. They sat in silence for a while, the night sounds of the ranch filtering in through the open window. An owl hooted somewhere in the distance. The wind rustled through the grass. It was peaceful in a way that felt fragile, like it could shatter at any moment. Finally, Serena spoke again. I think I can sleep now. You sure? Yes. Thank you for staying. Dalton stood, suddenly aware of how intimate this all was. Him in her bedroom in the middle of the night, both of them stripped down to their vulnerable cores. You have another nightmare. You can wake me. I don't mind. I'll remember that. He made it to the door before her voice stopped him again. Dalton, I'm glad you married me, even if it was just for practical reasons. I'm glad. He looked back at her, sitting in the lamplight with her dark hair loose around her shoulders, and felt something shift in his chest. Yeah, me too. The days that followed settled into a new rhythm. They were married now, legally bound, and somehow that changed things without changing them at all. They still slept in separate rooms, still maintained a careful distance during the day. But there were small shifts, Serena's hand on his arm when she passed him in the kitchen, Dalton helping her with the heavy work in the garden without being asked. Conversations that stretched longer, went deeper. She told him about her childhood in Boston, about a mother who'd loved her fiercely and a father who'd seen her as a commodity. Told him about the finishing school where she'd learned to play piano and speak French and curtsy properly, all skills designed to make her marriageable to the right kind of man. Told him about watching her mother die slowly while her father made deals behind closed doors to secure his financial future through her marriage. Dalton told her about growing up wild on the ranch, about a father who'd taught him to rope and ride before he could properly walk. Told her about losing his mother young and learning to cook and clean because there was no one else to do it. Told her about the war, though not in detail, just enough that she understood where the scars came from, both the ones on his body and the ones in his head. They were building something, not love, not yet, maybe not ever. But trust, understanding, the kind of foundation that might hold up under pressure, which was good because the pressure was coming. Dalton was mending fence on the north pasture when he saw the riders. 3 of them, silhouetted against the afternoon sun, moving with the kind of purpose that meant trouble. He recognized Hale's horse immediately. Expensive, well-bred, out of place in this rough country. The other 2 riders were strangers. Dalton secured the fence post he'd been working on and walked to meet them, rifle in hand but not raised. Hale dismounted first, that same cold smile on his scarred face. Mr. Reeves, we meet again. Hale! Dalton's eyes flicked to the other 2 men. One was older, wearing a marshal's badge. The other was younger, well-dressed, with the kind of soft hands that had never done hard work. Friends of yours? Associate, rather. This is Marshal Garrett from the Territorial Office, and Mr. Theodore Ashford, legal representative of the Ashford family. The name made Dalton's stomach clench, but he kept his face neutral. That's supposed to mean something to me? It means we're here on official business, the marshal said. He was a tired-looking man with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. We have reason to believe you're harboring a fugitive. That's so. A Miss Serena Vale, late of Philadelphia. She's wanted for breach of contract and theft. Theft? Theodore Ashford spoke for the first time, his voice smooth and educated. Miss Vale absconded with certain family property and documents when she fled. The Ashford family is willing to overlook the criminal charges if she's returned peacefully. Dalton felt anger rising but kept it contained. Don't know anyone by that name. Come now, Mr. Reeves. Hale's smile widened. We both know that's not true. The woman who arrived on the stagecoach 3 weeks ago, the woman you've been hiding here, the woman I married 2 days ago is named Serena Reeves. She's my wife, not your fugitive. That stopped them. Theodore Ashford's face went carefully blank. I'm sorry, did you say married? That's right. Got the papers from Judge Harmon if you want to see them. A marriage doesn't supersede an existing contract, Ashford said coldly. What contract? She never signed anything. Her father signed on her behalf. Her father's dead, and even if he wasn't, last I checked, women in this territory have the right to choose their own husbands. Dalton looked at the marshal. That's the law, isn't it? Garrett shifted uncomfortably. Well, yes, but no buts. She's my wife. She lives here. And unless you've got a warrant for her arrest signed by a territorial judge, you can turn around and ride back to wherever you came from. We can get a warrant, Hale said quietly. Then get one. Until you do, you're trespassing on my property. Mr. Reeves, the marshal's voice took on a warning tone. I'd advise you not to obstruct our investigation. And I'd advise you to make sure you've got legal standing before you start throwing your weight around. My wife hasn't committed any crime. Being born into the wrong family and refusing to marry some rich bastard's son isn't illegal. Theodore Ashford's face darkened. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I know exactly who I'm dealing with. Some Eastern family that thinks money means they can own people. Well, it doesn't work that way out here. Serena made her choice. She chose to come west, chose to marry me, chose to build a life here. That's final. Nothing is final until the courts say it is, Ashford said. We'll be back with proper documentation. And when we are, you'll have no legal grounds to refuse. We'll see about that. The 3 men exchanged looks. Finally, Hale remounted his horse, still wearing that infuriating smile. This isn't over, Mr. Reeves. Didn't think it was. They rode away and Dalton watched until they disappeared over the ridge. Then he turned and saw Serena standing on the porch, her face white as bone. You heard all that? Most of it. Her voice was barely a whisper. They're going to come back. With a warrant. With the law on their side. Then we'll fight them legally. With what? We don't have money for lawyers. The Ashfords have dozens. We have the truth. She laughed, and it sounded broken. The truth doesn't matter when the other side can buy whatever verdict they want. Don't you understand? Theodore Ashford is Marcus's cousin. He's one of their top lawyers. If he's here personally, it means they're not taking chances. They'll manufacture evidence, bribe officials, do whatever it takes to get me back. Then we'll leave, go somewhere they can't find us. Where? They found me in Wyoming. They'll find me anywhere. She sat down hard on the porch steps, her strength seeming to give out all at once. I should never have let you marry me. Now you're caught up in this, and when they take me back, they're not taking you anywhere. You can't stop them. Watch me. Dalton sat down beside her. Look, I know it seems bad, and maybe it is, but we're not giving up. We find a lawyer, we fight this properly. There's got to be someone in the territory who can't be bought. And if there isn't, then we deal with that when we come to it. He took her hand and she didn't pull away. You're my wife, Serena. That means something to me. It means I don't abandon you when things get hard. Even if fighting for me ruins you? Even then. She turned to look at him, and her eyes were full of fear and something else. Something that looked almost like hope. Why? Why would you risk everything for someone you barely know? Dalton didn't have a good answer to that. Didn't fully understand it himself. All he knew was that the thought of Hale dragging her back east, of her being forced into a marriage she didn't want, made his blood boil in a way nothing had in 2 years. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said finally, "and because somewhere along the way, you stopped being a stranger and started being something more. I don't know what that is yet, but it's enough to fight for." Serena's breath hitched, and then she was leaning against him, her head on his shoulder, his arm coming around her automatically. They sat like that as the sun set, two people facing impossible odds, drawing what strength they could from each other. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know. What if we lose? Then at least we go down fighting." She pulled back to look at him. "You're either the bravest man I've ever met or the most foolish. Told you before, probably both." And despite everything, she smiled. The lawyer they found was a drunk. Not actively drunk when they met him, but the signs were there. The yellowed eyes, the slight tremor in his hands, the smell of whiskey that clung to his clothes like cologne. His office above the feed store in Red Hollow Ridge was cluttered with dusty law books and empty bottles, and his desk was buried under papers that looked like they hadn't been touched in months. "Samuel Crawford," he said, extending a shaky hand. "Pleased to meet you folks." Dalton shook it reluctantly. "You're the only lawyer in town. The only one who'll take your case anyway." Crawford gestured to the chairs in front of his desk, both of which were piled with more papers. He swept them onto the floor without ceremony. "Word travels fast. Everyone knows the Ashfords are after your wife. Nobody wants to touch that with a 10-foot pole." "And you do?" Serena asked quietly. "Lady, at this point in my career, I'll take any case that pays. And from what I hear, yours is actually interesting." He sat down heavily in his own chair, which creaked ominously. "So, tell me everything." They did. Serena talked for nearly an hour, laying out the whole sordid story. Her father's debts, the arranged marriage, Marcus Ashford's insistence on the contract despite her objections, her escape 3 days before the wedding. Crawford listened, taking notes on a legal pad, occasionally interrupting to ask clarifying questions. When she finished, he leaned back and stared at the ceiling for a long moment. "Well?" Dalton prompted. "Well, it's bad, but it's not hopeless." Crawford flipped through his notes. "The contract your father signed. Do you know what the terms were?" "Not exactly. I never saw the final document, but I know it promised my marriage to Marcus in exchange for covering my father's debts and maintaining business connections through my mother's family." "And you never signed it yourself?" "No, my father signed it on my behalf when I was 21. I didn't even know about it until after my mother died." Crawford nodded slowly. "That's good. That's very good. Wyoming territorial law is pretty clear on this. A woman over the age of majority can't be forced into marriage against her will, regardless of any contract her father signed. The problem is proving you didn't go willingly." "She ran away 3 days before the wedding," Dalton said. "How much more unwilling can you get?" In the eyes of the law, running away could be interpreted as cold feet, not coercion. The Ashfords will argue she had a change of heart, but is still legally obligated to honor the contract. They'll claim the marriage arrangement was consideration for valuable benefits already received, namely the payment of her father's debts. "So we're fighting a losing battle," Serena said flatly. "I didn't say that. I said it's complicated." Crawford pulled out a bottle from his desk drawer, looked at it longingly, then put it back with visible effort. "Your marriage to Mr. Reeves changes things. It establishes you as a Wyoming resident with territorial protections. But the Ashfords will challenge the validity of that marriage, claim it was entered into fraudulently to evade the contract." "It wasn't fraudulent," Dalton said. "We went through proper legal channels. Judge Harmon married us." "I believe you, but they'll argue you conspired to circumvent an existing obligation. They'll paint you as the villain who seduced a vulnerable woman away from her rightful fiancé." Crawford looked at Dalton. "You ready for that kind of fight? Because it's going to get ugly." "I'm ready." "Good. Because here's what we're up against. Theodore Ashford is one of the best contract lawyers in Philadelphia. He's got resources, connections, and a reputation for winning cases that should be unwinnable. He'll file a petition to invalidate your marriage, and he'll do it in front of a judge who can be bought or intimidated. Our only advantage is that we're on our home turf. Territorial courts don't take kindly to Eastern money trying to push them around." "So what do we do?" Serena asked. "We build a case that shows your marriage is legitimate, that you were coerced into the original arrangement, and that you have the legal right to choose your own husband. We gather witnesses who can testify to your character and the authenticity of your relationship with Mr. Reeves, and we pray Judge Harmon isn't on the Ashford payroll." "He's not," Dalton said with more confidence than he felt. "Harmon's honest, stubborn as hell, but honest. Then we've got a shot." Crawford stood, swaying slightly. "I'll need time to prepare. A week, maybe 2. In the meantime, you two need to act like a real married couple. The more legitimate this looks, the harder it'll be for the Ashfords to tear it apart." They left Crawford's office with more questions than answers. The street below was busy with the afternoon crowd. Ranchers picking up supplies, women shopping, children running between buildings. Normal life going on while Serena's world hung in the balance. "Do you trust him?" she asked as they climbed into the wagon. "Don't know him well enough to trust him, but he's what we've got. He's a drunk."
"Yeah, I noticed that." Dalton gathered the reins. "Still sharp, though. Did you see how fast he went through those legal points? He knows his stuff, even if he's pickling his brain with whiskey. That's not exactly reassuring. Would you rather have no lawyer at all?" She was quiet for a moment. "No, you're right. I'm scared, Dalton. This is really happening. They're really coming after me with everything they have." "I know. And if we lose, we're not going to lose."
"You can't promise that." He looked at her, at the fear written across her face, and felt that same protective anger rise in his chest. "No, I can't. But I can promise I'll fight like hell to make sure we don't. That good enough?" She managed a small smile. "It has to be, doesn't it?" The ride back to the ranch was quiet. Dalton's mind was churning through everything Crawford had said, looking for angles, for weaknesses in the Ashford case. He wasn't a legal expert, but he understood fights. And this was a fight, no different from the ones he'd been in during the war, just with words instead of bullets. When they got home, Serena went straight to the kitchen and threw herself into cooking with an intensity that bordered on violent. Dalton watched her attack vegetables like they'd personally offended her, the knife slamming against the cutting board with sharp, angry thwacks. "Want to talk about it?" he asked from the doorway. "No? Want me to leave you alone?"
"Yes. No, I don't know." She set down the knife with a frustrated sound. "I hate this. I hate feeling helpless. I hate that they can still control my life even though I'm 1,000 miles away. I hate that you're caught up in this mess because of me. Already told you I don't mind." "Well, you should. You should be furious with me for bringing this down on you." Dalton crossed to her, gently taking the knife from her hand before she cut herself. "I'm not furious. I'm angry at the Ashfords for thinking they can buy and sell people like property, but I'm not angry at you." "Why not?" "Because you didn't do anything wrong. You just wanted to live your own life." "That's all?" Her voice cracked. "Just that simple?" "Yeah, just that simple."
She looked up at him and tears were streaming down her face. "I've ruined everything. The life you had here, the peace was killing me." The words came out before he could stop them. "I've been half dead for 2 years, Serena, just going through the motions. You coming here, you bringing your problems, and your fear and your determination to survive, that woke something up in me. So no, you didn't ruin anything. You saved me from slowly rotting away in this house." She stared at him, mouth slightly open, tears still tracking down her cheeks. Then she stepped forward and kissed him. It wasn't like the chaste kiss on the cheek from before. This was desperate and searching, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. Dalton froze for a half second, shocked, then kissed her back. His hands found her waist, steadying her, and he felt her trembling against him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Serena immediately stepped back. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. Don't apologize. We agreed this was practical, a partnership, not. I know what we agreed." He ran a hand through his hair, his heart still pounding. "But maybe things change. Maybe we're allowed to change our minds. Are we? I don't know. Are we?" She wrapped her arms around herself, looking lost. "I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to do this. Every time I've trusted someone, every time I've let myself feel something real, it's ended badly. My father sold me. The man I was supposed to marry sees me as a commodity. How am I supposed to? I'm not them." Dalton took a step closer, keeping his voice gentle. "I'm not your father, and I'm sure as hell not Marcus Ashford. If you want this,
If you want us to be more than just a legal arrangement, then we can try. But if you don't, if it's too much, then we keep things the way they are. Either way, I'm not going anywhere." "You say that now." "I say it always. Serena, I married you. That means something to me, whether or not there's whatever that was just now. You're stuck with me." She laughed, but it came out like a sob. "You're insane. Been over this?" "Yeah, probably." She moved into his arms then, not kissing him this time, just holding on like he was the only solid thing in a world that kept shifting under her feet. Dalton held her, feeling the sharp edge of her shoulder blades through her dress, the way she fit against him like she'd been made to be there. "I'm terrified," she whispered against his chest. "Of the Ashfords? Of everything. Of losing this. Of losing you. Of finding out this is all just temporary, and I'll have to go back to running and hiding and never trusting anyone." "You won't. I promise you won't." "You can't promise that. Watch me." They stood there at the kitchen as the light faded outside, holding each other while the weight of what was coming pressed down on them. When Serena finally pulled away, her eyes were red but dry, and there was a determination in her face that hadn't been there before. "All right," she said. "We fight. Together. Whatever it takes." "Whatever it takes," Dalton echoed. That night, Serena didn't go to her room upstairs. She stayed with Dalton, sitting on the porch as the stars came out, talking about everything and nothing. He told her about the time he'd broken his arm falling off a horse and had to set it himself because the nearest doctor was 3 days away. She told him about learning to play piano and hating every minute of it until she discovered she could make the instrument sound like thunder if she hit the keys hard enough. They talked until they were both too tired to form coherent sentences, and then Serena stood and hesitated at the door. "I should," she gestured vaguely upstairs. "Yeah," but neither of them moved. "Or," Dalton said slowly, "you could stay down here. Not in my room," he added quickly. "Just in the house. Closer. In case you have another nightmare." "In case I have another nightmare," she repeated, but there was the ghost of a smile on her lips. "That's my story and I'm sticking to it." "All right. For the nightmares then." She went upstairs and came back down with a blanket, settling onto the worn sofa in the parlor. Dalton brought her a pillow from his room, and they said goodnight from opposite ends of the house, both knowing this was a line being crossed, but neither quite ready to name it. Dalton lay awake in his small room, listening to the sounds of Serena settling in, and wondered what the hell he was doing. He'd married her to protect her. That was the deal. But somewhere along the way, it had become more complicated. He wanted to protect her, yes, but he also wanted her to stay, wanted her laugh and her sharp observations and the way she looked at him like he was worth something. He was in trouble. The kind of trouble that ended with hearts getting broken. But as he drifted off to sleep, he couldn't bring himself to regret it. The next week passed in a strange limbo. They waited for the Ashfords to make their move while trying to build some kind of normal life. Crawford sent word that he was preparing their defense but needed more time. Dalton worked the ranch. Serena continued transforming the house. And between them, something was growing that neither quite knew how to name. They were more comfortable with each other now. Serena touched his arm when she talked. Dalton found excuses to be in whatever room she was working in. They started eating meals slower, dragging out conversations, reluctant to part ways. The kisses became more frequent. Goodnight kisses. Good morning kisses. Random kisses in the middle of the day for no reason except they both wanted to. It felt like playing house, like pretending it's something real while waiting for reality to catch up and ruin everything. On the 8th day, reality arrived. Dalton saw the dust cloud first. 3 riders again, but this time with a 4th, a woman on a black mare, riding like she'd been born in the saddle. As they got closer, he recognized Hale, the marshal, and Theodore Ashford. The woman was a stranger, middle-aged and severe-looking, dressed in expensive riding clothes that seemed ridiculous out here. "Serena," he called toward the house. "They're back." She appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. When she saw the riders, all the color drained from her face. "That's Eleanor Ashford, Marcus's mother." "Wonderful." They walked out together to meet the group. Eleanor Ashford dismounted with practiced grace, her cold eyes sweeping over the ranch with obvious disdain before settling on Serena. "Serena Vale, you've led us on quite the chase." It's Serena Reeves now, Serena said, her voice steady despite her pale face. And I wasn't trying to be found. Clearly, Eleanor's gaze flicked to Dalton. And you must be the man foolish enough to marry a woman promised to my son. Dalton Reeves. And she wasn't promised to anyone. She was sold, and there's a difference. Eleanor's expression didn't change. I'm not here to debate semantics. I'm here to offer you both a way out of this unfortunate situation.
We don't want a way out, Dalton said. You will when you hear the alternative. Eleanor reached into her riding coat and pulled out a thick envelope. This is a petition to invalidate your marriage on grounds of fraud. It's been filed with the territorial court and will be heard in 2 weeks. We have depositions from witnesses who will testify that Miss Vale fled Philadelphia to evade her legal obligations, and that this marriage was entered into solely to circumvent those obligations.
Those witnesses are lying, Serena said. That's for the court to decide. However, my family is prepared to be generous. If you annul this marriage and return to Philadelphia to honor your commitment to Marcus, we'll drop all charges and forgive any outstanding debts. You'll be married into one of the most powerful families in Pennsylvania. You'll want for nothing. Except freedom, Serena shot back. Freedom is overrated. Security, comfort, position, these are what matter. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. Look at where your freedom has gotten you. A failing ranch in the middle of nowhere, married to a man with nothing, facing legal proceedings that will bankrupt you both. Is that really better than what we're offering? Yes, Serena said without hesitation. 1,000 times yes.
Eleanor looked at her for a long moment,
Then sighed. I had hoped you'd be reasonable. Very well, we'll see you in court. She turned to Dalton. And you, Mr. Reeves, I suggest you hire the best lawyer you can afford. You're going to need one. Already have one. Samuel Crawford? Eleanor actually laughed. That drunk hasn't won a case in 5 years. But if you insist on throwing your money away, that's your choice.
She remounted her horse, and the other 3 did the same. As they turned to leave, Victor Hale paused, looking directly at Dalton. Fair warning, Reeves. The Ashfords don't lose. They'll destroy you both before they let her go. Walk away while you still can. Thanks for the advice. Not taking it. Hale shrugged. Your funeral. They rode off, leaving Dalton and Serena standing in the dust. Serena was shaking, and Dalton put an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. Did you hear what she said? Serena's voice was barely a whisper. They've already filed. They have witnesses. They're going to tear us apart in court, and there's nothing we can do about it. We fight back. Crawford said we had a shot. Crawford's a drunk who hasn't won a case in 5 years. Eleanor Ashford just told us that herself. We're going to lose, Dalton. We're going to lose everything. You don't know that. She pulled away from him, anger and fear warring in her expression. Yes, I do. I've seen the Ashfords work. They don't fight fair. They buy judges, intimidate witnesses, manufacture evidence. They'll make you look like a predator who took advantage of a vulnerable woman. They'll make me look like a hysterical child who doesn't know her own mind. And when they're done, I'll be on a train back to Philadelphia, and you'll be ruined. Then we leave. Right now. Pack up and go somewhere they can't find us. Where? They found me in Wyoming. They'll find me anywhere in the territories. And if we run, it just proves we're guilty of fraud. We'd be running for the rest of our lives. Dalton grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. So what do you want to do? Give up? Go back with them? Marry Marcus Ashford and spend the rest of your life being someone's property? No, I want to fight. I want to win. I want to live my life without looking over my shoulder. But I don't know how to do that when they have all the power and we have nothing. We have the truth. The truth doesn't matter. She was crying now, tears of frustration and rage. Don't you understand? The truth is whatever they say it is. They have money, they have influence, they have everything. We're nobody. We don't matter. You matter to me. The words hung in the air between them. Serena stopped, staring at him with wide eyes. You matter to me, Dalton repeated quietly, and I know that doesn't fix anything. I know it doesn't make the Ashfords go away or change the fact that we're outmatched, but it's true. You matter to me. And I'm not giving up on you. I don't care what they throw at us. I don't care if we lose everything. I'm not letting them take you. Why? The word came out broken. Why do you care so much? Dalton didn't have a good answer.
didn't have words for the thing that had grown between them over the past weeks. All he knew was that the thought of her being forced back east, of her marrying Marcus Ashford, of never seeing her again, made him feel like his chest was being crushed. "Because you're my wife," he said finally. "And because somewhere along the way that started meaning something real to me. I don't know when it happened, but it did, and I'm not letting you go without a fight." Serena's face crumpled and she threw her arms around him, burying her face in his chest. "I'm so scared." "I know, me too. What if it's not enough? What if we lose anyway?" "Then at least we'll lose together." They held each other in the fading afternoon light, while the enormity of what they were facing settled over them. 2 weeks until the hearing. 2 weeks to build a case against one of the most powerful families in Philadelphia. 2 weeks to prove their marriage was real and not just a legal maneuver. 2 weeks to figure out if what was growing between them was strong enough to survive what was coming. That night, Serena didn't go to the parlor. She stood at Dalton's door, hesitant, vulnerable in her nightgown with her hair down. "I don't want to be alone tonight," she said quietly. "Okay." She slipped into his small room, and he made space for her on the narrow bed. They lay facing each other in the darkness, close enough to touch, but not touching, just being near each other. "Tell me something," she whispered. "Something real. Something that's just yours." Dalton thought for a moment. "When Elizabeth died, I wanted to die too. Not actively. I didn't do anything to hurt myself. But I stopped caring whether I lived or not. Stopped eating enough, stopped sleeping, stopped doing anything except the bare minimum to keep the ranch from falling apart completely. I was just waiting for something to end it. What changed? You showed up, and suddenly I had a reason to get up in the morning. Had someone to cook for, someone to talk to. Had something worth protecting again. You gave me a reason to keep living, Serena. Even if we lose this fight, even if everything falls apart, I'm grateful for that." She was quiet for so long he thought she might have fallen asleep. Then her hand found his in the darkness, fingers intertwining. "I was so alone in Philadelphia," she said softly. "After my mother died, there was no one who cared about me as a person, just what I represented, what I could do for them. I forgot what it felt like to matter to someone, to be seen as more than just a commodity or a problem. You made me remember that. You made me feel human again. You are human, always were. I know. But I'd forgotten. Thank you for reminding me." They fell asleep like that, hands clasped, foreheads nearly touching, two people finding comfort in each other while the world outside prepared to tear them apart. The morning brought a surprise. Marshal Tucker showed up at dawn, alone, looking uncomfortable. "Reeves, got a minute?" Dalton stepped out onto the porch, careful not to wake Serena. "What's this about?" "About the Ashfords, about the warrant they're trying to get." Tucker shifted his weight. "Look, I know we're not friends, but I've known you a long time, known you to be an honest man, so I'm going to give you some advice you didn't ask for." "I'm listening." "That Theodore Ashford, he's been making the rounds, offering money to anyone who'll testify that your wife came out here under false pretenses, offering to pay off debts, fix legal troubles, whatever it takes. And he's getting takers. By the time that hearing rolls around, he's going to have half the town swearing your marriage is a sham." Dalton felt his jaw tighten. "You one of those takers?" "No. And neither's Harmon. He told Ashford to go to hell when he tried to bribe him. But enough others have taken the money that it's going to be a problem." Tucker met his eyes. "I can't testify for you. My position doesn't allow it. But I wanted you to know what you're up against." "Appreciate it. One more thing. That Victor Hale character, he's dangerous, not just talk. I did some asking around, called in some favors back east. Man's got a reputation for making problems disappear. Usually legally, but not always. You watch your back." "Will do." Tucker nodded and left, and Dalton stood on the porch watching the sunrise, feeling the weight of what was coming pressing down on him. They had 2 weeks to build a defense against a family with unlimited resources and no moral boundaries. 2 weeks to prove something real in a system designed to favor money over truth. It wasn't enough time, but it was all they had. When Dalton went back inside, Serena was awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. She looked up at him with hollow eyes. "I heard," she said, "about the bribes. You were listening?" "I couldn't sleep. I heard Tucker's horse and..." She wrapped her hands around the cup. It's worse than I thought. If they're buying testimony, we don't have a chance. Dalton sat down across from her. We still have Crawford. We still have the truth. The truth that nobody will believe because everyone's been paid to contradict it. She finally took a sip of coffee, grimaced at how cold it had gotten. Maybe I should just go back. Save you from this. We've been over this. I know, but Dalton, they're going to destroy you. Your reputation, your ranch, everything. And for what? For someone you barely knew a month ago? I know you better now. Do you? She set down the cup with more force than necessary. Do you really? Because I've been thinking about what Eleanor said yesterday. About how I fled my obligations. How I'm using you to escape consequences. And maybe she's right. Maybe I am selfish. Maybe I'm just running from my responsibilities. Marriage to a man you don't love isn't a responsibility, it's slavery. Is it? Or is it just what women like me have to accept? My mother accepted it. She married my father because her family arranged it, and she made it work. She was never happy, but she was comfortable, safe. Maybe that's enough. Dalton felt something cold settle in his stomach. You don't believe that. I don't know what I believe anymore. She stood abruptly, pacing to the window. I'm so tired, Dalton. Tired of running, tired of fighting, tired of dragging you down with me. Maybe everyone would be better off if I just went back and did what they want. Everyone except you. Maybe I don't get to matter. The words hung in the air, and Dalton felt anger rising, not at her, but at everyone who'd ever made her believe that. Her father, the Ashfords, a whole system designed to crush women like her until they stopped fighting. You matter, he said, standing. You matter to me. And I'm not letting you give up just because they're making this hard. That's what they want. They want you to feel hopeless so you'll come quietly. Don't give them that. What if I can't help it? What if I don't have any fight left? Then I'll fight for both of us. She turned from the window and tears were streaming down her face. Why? Why do you care so much? I'm nobody. I'm just some Eastern woman who showed up on your doorstep with problems. You're my wife. On paper. It's more than that now and you know it. She shook her head. Is it? Or are we just two lonely people pretending we're not, playing house while we wait for reality to catch up? The words hit harder than he expected, because part of him wondered the same thing. Was what they had real, or was it just convenience wrapped in desperation? He'd only known her a month. They'd kissed a handful of times, slept in the same bed once. Was that enough to build something on, or were they just fooling themselves? But then he thought about her laugh when he told bad jokes, the way she hummed while she worked in the garden, how she'd transformed his house from a mausoleum into something that felt alive. The way she looked at him sometimes, like he was worth something instead of just a shell of a man going through motions. I don't know if it's real, he admitted. I don't know if what we have is strong enough to last beyond this crisis. But I know I want the chance to find out. And I know that if they take you back, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what might have been. I can't do that again, Serena. I can't lose someone else and just keep going like it doesn't matter. She crossed to him, reaching up to touch his face. I'm not Elizabeth. I know that. Then stop trying to save me to make up for not saving her. The words were a punch to the gut. That's not what this is. Isn't it? You said yourself you failed her, failed to protect her. Now you've got another chance with me, and you're throwing everything at it to prove you're not that man who couldn't save his wife. Her hand dropped. But I'm not a second chance, Dalton. I'm just me. And maybe that's not enough. You're wrong. Am I? He grabbed her shoulders, not roughly, but firmly enough that she had to meet his eyes. Yes, you're wrong. This isn't about Elizabeth. This is about you. About the fact that you walked into my life and reminded me what it feels like to give a damn about something. About someone. Maybe that started as guilt or penance or whatever you want to call it, but it's not that anymore. It's just you, and I'm not ready to lose that. She searched his face, looking for something. Whatever she found there made her shoulders sag. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to let someone in without waiting for them to hurt me. Then we figure it out together, one day at a time. He pulled her closer. But we do it here. Not in Philadelphia. Not with you married to some bastard who sees you as property. Here, with me. What if we can't win? Then we lose together. but at least we'll know we tried. She leaned her forehead against his chest, and he felt her trembling. I'm so scared. Me too. They stood like that for a long time, drawing strength from each other, until Serena finally pulled back and wiped her eyes. All right, she said. All right, we fight. No more talking about giving up. We see this through. Together? Together. The next few days were a blur of preparation. Crawford came out to the ranch to coach them on what to expect in court, what questions they'd face, how to present themselves. He was sober for the meetings, which Dalton took as a good sign, though the shaking in his hands got worse as the days wore on. The key is consistency, Crawford said, pacing the parlor while Dalton and Serena sat on the sofa. They're going to try to trip you up, get you to contradict each other. So we need to have our story straight. How you met, why you married, what your relationship is like. Every detail needs to match. We tell the truth, Serena said. The truth is good, but we need to frame it right. You came west seeking a new life through the mail-order bride system. Dalton was looking for a partner to help run his ranch. You met, you connected, you married. That's the story. Don't embellish it, don't add unnecessary details. Just the facts. What about my engagement to Marcus? Serena asked. We admit it existed, but emphasized you never consented to it. Your father arranged it without your knowledge or approval. When you found out, you fled rather than be forced into an unwanted marriage. That's not fraud, that's self-preservation. The Ashfords will say she accepted benefits from the arrangement, Dalton pointed out. Let them. Wyoming law is clear. A woman can't be forced into marriage to pay off someone else's debts. That's indentured servitude, which is illegal. We hammer that point home. Crawford stopped pacing and looked at them seriously. But here's the thing. None of this matters if you two can't convince the judge you're actually married. Not just legally, but really married. The Ashfords are going to paint this as a sham. You need to prove it's not. How? Serena asked. Little things. The way you look at each other. How you interact. Whether you seem like two people who are actually building a life together or two strangers playing parts. He focused on Dalton. And you need to be careful. The Ashfords will try to make you look like a predator who took advantage of a vulnerable woman. Don't give them ammunition. I haven't done anything wrong. I know that. But they'll twist everything. The fact that you married so quickly, that she's living in your house, that you're significantly older than her. I'm only 7 years older. Doesn't matter. They'll use it. Crawford rubbed his face. Look, I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to prepare you. This is going to be ugly. They're going to attack your character, your motives, your relationship. And you need to stay calm and consistent no matter what they throw at you. After Crawford left, Dalton found Serena upstairs in the hallway, standing in front of the locked door to Elizabeth's room. You all right? He asked. She didn't turn around. Crawford said we need to prove we're really married, really building a life together. Yeah, but we're not, are we? Not fully. You're still holding on to your past, still keeping that room locked like it's a shrine. She finally looked at him. How can we convince anyone we're moving forward when you won't even let go of what's behind you? Dalton felt defensive anger rise. That's not fair, isn't it? You keep that room sealed up. You won't talk about her except in the vaguest terms. You sleep in a room the size of a closet because you can't stand to be upstairs where her ghost is. How is that moving forward? You don't understand? Then help me understand. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're trying to save me while you're still drowning yourself. The words were harsh, but not wrong. Dalton looked at the locked door and felt the familiar weight of guilt and grief pressing down on him. 2 years he'd kept that room sealed. 2 years of pretending the past didn't exist because looking at it hurt too much. She died in there, he said quietly. In that room. In our bed. I found her in the morning, cold. The baby still. They were both just gone. And I couldn't do anything. Couldn't save them. Couldn't even say goodbye properly because by the time I realized something was wrong, it was too late. His voice cracked. So I locked the door, put everything away, tried to forget it ever happened. And did it work? No. It made it worse. Made the whole house feel like a tomb. He ran a hand through his hair. I know I need to deal with it. I know keeping it locked isn't healthy, but every time I think about opening that door, I can't. Serena moved closer, taking his hand. What if we did it together? What? What if we opened it together? You don't have to face it alone anymore, Dalton. I'm here. I'm your wife. Let me help you. I don't know if I can.
You don't have to be strong all the time. You don't have to carry everything by yourself. She squeezed his hand. Let me in, all the way in. Let me help you heal. Dalton looked at her, at the compassion in her eyes, and felt something break open in his chest. She was right. He'd been so focused on protecting her, on being strong for her, that he'd forgotten he was allowed to be broken too, allowed to need help. Okay, he said. Okay, but not today. I need time to prepare. Whenever you're ready, I'll be here. She started to leave, but he caught her hand, pulling her back. Serena? Thank you for not giving up on me. You didn't give up on me. Seems only fair I return the favor. That night, Dalton lay awake thinking about the locked room, about Elizabeth and the baby who'd never taken a breath, about 2 years of grief he'd buried instead of processing, about Serena, who'd seen through his defenses and offered to help carry the weight. He'd told himself he was protecting her, but maybe she was protecting him too. The thought was both terrifying and comforting. 3 days before the hearing, Dalton made his decision. He found Serena in the garden and said simply, I'm ready. She didn't ask what he meant. Just set down her tools, wiped her hands on her apron, and followed him upstairs. They stood in front of the locked door together, and Dalton pulled the key from his pocket. His hand was shaking so badly it took 3 tries to get it in the lock. You don't have to do this if you're not ready, Serena said quietly. I'm not ready, but I need to do it anyway. He turned the key, and the lock clicked open with a sound that seemed too loud in the quiet hallway. The door swung open and the smell hit him first. Dust and stale air, and something else. Something that smelled like death and grief. The room was exactly as he'd left it 2 years ago. The bed unmade, sheets still tangled from that last night. Elizabeth's nightgown still draped over the chair. Her hairbrush on the dresser, still full of dark hair. Dalton's legs went weak, and he grabbed the doorframe for support. Serena's hand found his back, steadying him. I can't, he choked out. I can't do this. Yes, you can. Just breathe. I'm right here. He forced himself to step inside. The floorboards creaked under his weight, and dust motes danced in the afternoon light filtering through the grimy windows. Everything was covered in a thick layer of dust. The furniture, the pictures on the walls, the small cradle in the corner that had never been used. Tell me about her, Serena said softly. Dalton moved to the dresser, picking up the hairbrush with trembling hands. Her name was Elizabeth Ann Reeves. She was 23 when we married, daughter of a rancher from Montana. Strong, stubborn, never backed down from anything. He set down the brush. We met at a cattle auction. She was there with her father, and I was there buying stock. She outbid me on a bull I wanted, then had the nerve to laugh about it. Sounds like someone with spirit. She had that in spades. Drove me crazy half the time, but I loved her for it. He moved to the bed, sitting on the edge carefully like it might collapse. We were married for 3 years. Good years, mostly. We fought sometimes. She had a temper and I'm stubborn, but we always worked it out. Then she got pregnant and everything seemed perfect. We were going to have a family, build something together. What happened? Baby was breech. I didn't know. She didn't know. Everything seemed fine until her labor started, and then he had to stop, swallow against the tightness in his throat. It took all night. She was in so much pain, and I couldn't help. Couldn't do anything but hold her hand and tell her it would be okay. But it wasn't okay. By morning, they were both gone. Serena sat beside him, close but not touching. It wasn't your fault. I know that in my head. But my heart keeps saying I should have known, should have gotten her to a doctor earlier, should have done something different. You did everything you could. It wasn't enough. It never feels like enough when someone dies, but that doesn't make it your fault. She finally reached over, taking his hand. She wouldn't want you to live like this, locked in grief, unable to move forward. How do you know what she'd want? Because any woman who loved you would want you to be happy, would want you to live, not just exist. Serena looked around the room. This, keeping everything frozen in time, it's not honoring her memory, it's punishing yourself. Dalton knew she was right, had known it for a long time but couldn't face it. I don't know how to let go. You don't have to let go. You just have to make room for something new alongside the old. She'll always be part of your story, Dalton, but she doesn't have to be the whole story. He looked at Serena, really looked at her, and saw understanding in her eyes. She'd lost people too. Her mother. Her old life. The future she'd thought she'd have. She understood grief in a way most people didn't. "What do we do with all this?" he asked, gesturing to the room. "Whatever you want. We can pack it away properly, give away what can be useful, keep what matters. But we do it together, and we do it with respect." She squeezed his hand. "And then we close this chapter so you can start a new one." They spent the rest of the afternoon sorting through Elizabeth's things. Dalton told stories about nearly every item: the shawl she'd worn on their wedding day, the book of poetry she'd loved, the ridiculous hat she'd bought on a trip to Denver and never worn because it made her look like a confused ostrich. Serena laughed at his descriptions, and somehow that made it easier, made the grief feel less like drowning and more like remembering. They packed most of the clothes to give to families in town who could use them, kept a few personal items: the hairbrush, a locket with Elizabeth's picture, the wedding shawl. Put the baby clothes in a trunk for storage because Dalton couldn't bear to look at them, but couldn't throw them away either. By the time the sun started to set, the room was mostly empty, just furniture and dust and the ghosts of what might have been. "How do you feel?" Serena asked. Dalton sat on the bare mattress, looking around. "Lighter, sad but lighter, like I can finally breathe properly." "That's good." "Yeah." He looked at her. "Thank you for helping me do this. I couldn't have done it alone." "You don't have to do anything alone anymore. That's what marriage means, right? Sharing the weight." "Even in a practical arrangement?" She smiled. "I think we both know this stopped being just practical a while ago." "Yeah, I guess we do." That night, Serena stayed with Dalton again. Not in the parlor, not keeping a careful distance. In his room, in his bed, holding each other in the dark while they talked about everything and nothing. It wasn't about passion or desire, though Dalton felt both of those things. It was about comfort, about not being alone, about two broken people trying to heal each other. "I'm still scared about the hearing," Serena whispered. "Me too." "What if we lose? Then we figure out what comes next. But we do it together." She was quiet for a moment. "I think I'm falling in love with you." The words should have terrified him, should have sent him running because he'd sworn, after Elizabeth died, that he'd never let himself feel that way about anyone again. But instead, he felt something warm unfold in his chest. "That's probably not smart," he said. "I know. We've only known each other a month." "I know that too. And everything's a mess, and we might lose everything in 2 days." "Dalton?" "Yeah?" "Stop listing reasons why this is a bad idea and just tell me how you feel." He pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I think I'm falling in love with you too, and you're right, it's probably not smart. But I don't care." "Good. Because I don't care either." They fell asleep wrapped around each other, and for the first time in 2 years, Dalton didn't dream about death. He dreamed about spring and new beginnings, and a woman with dark hair who'd somehow become his entire world. The morning of the hearing dawned cold and gray. Dalton woke to find Serena already up, standing at the window in her nightgown, looking out at the mountains. "You sleep at all?" he asked. "A little." Kept waking up. She didn't turn around. "This is it. In a few hours, we'll know if we get to keep this life or if it all falls apart." Dalton got up and moved behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Whatever happens, we face it together." "I know, but I'm still terrified." "So am I." They got dressed in silence, both putting on their best clothes. Dalton wore the same suit he'd worn to their wedding. Serena wore a simple dark dress that made her look older, more serious. They barely touched breakfast, neither of them having much appetite. Crawford met them at the courthouse, looking haggard but sober. "You ready?" "No," Dalton said honestly, "but let's do it anyway." The courtroom was packed. Half the town had turned out to watch, along with a contingent of well-dressed strangers who had to be Ashford people. Theodore Ashford sat at the plaintiff's table, looking smug and confident. Eleanor Ashford sat in the front row, her face a mask of cold satisfaction. And in the back corner, barely visible, sat Victor Hale, watching everything with those dead eyes. Judge Harmon entered, and everyone stood. He was stern-faced and unreadable as he took his seat and banged his gavel.
We're here regarding a petition to invalidate the marriage between Dalton Reeves and Serena Vale Reeves. Mr. Ashford, you may present your case. Theodore Ashford stood, and Dalton felt Serena's hand find his under the table, gripping tight. This was it. Everything they'd built, everything they'd fought for, was about to be tested. And Dalton had no idea if it would be enough. Theodore Ashford's opening statement was precise and brutal. He painted Serena as a runaway who'd stolen family documents and fled her legal obligations. Painted Dalton as an opportunist who'd taken advantage of a vulnerable woman for his own purposes. He produced letters, contracts, testimonies from people back east who swore Serena had been eager for the marriage until she got cold feet at the last minute. The facts are simple, Your Honor, Ashford said, his voice smooth as oil. Miss Vale entered into a binding agreement through her father's legal authority. She accepted the benefits of that agreement. Her father's debts were paid. She lived in comfort for years knowing this arrangement existed. Then, when it came time to fulfill her end of the bargain, she fled. Mr. Reeves's marriage to her is nothing more than a legal maneuver designed to evade those obligations. It should be invalidated immediately. Judge Harmon listened without expression, taking notes. When Ashford finished, he looked at Crawford. Your response, counselor? Crawford stood, and Dalton noticed his hands weren't shaking anymore. Something had changed in the old lawyer. Maybe desperation, maybe determination, but whatever it was had burned away the alcohol fog and left something sharper behind. Your Honor, the Ashfords would have this court believe that women are property to be bought and sold by their fathers. That once a contract is signed, without the woman's knowledge or consent, she becomes bound to it for life regardless of her own wishes. That's not law. That's slavery. Crawford's voice grew stronger. Serena Vale Reeves is a citizen of this territory with the same rights as any man. She has the right to choose her own husband, the right to refuse a marriage she never agreed to, and the right to build a new life without being dragged back to pay off someone else's debts. The contract was legal under Pennsylvania law, Ashford interjected. We're not in Pennsylvania, Crawford shot back. We're in Wyoming, and Wyoming law is very clear. No woman can be forced into marriage against her will. Not for money, not for family honor, not for any reason. The Ashford's contract is worth less than the paper it's written on in this jurisdiction. Harmon held up a hand. I'll hear testimony before I make any rulings. Mr. Ashford, call your first witness. The parade of witnesses was worse than Dalton had imagined. 3 townspeople who'd been paid to testify that Serena had seemed nervous and uncertain when she arrived, that the marriage had seemed rushed and suspicious. A clerk from the marriage broker who claimed Serena's application had been filled out hurriedly with obvious false information. Even the stagecoach driver who'd brought her to Red Hollow Ridge, saying she'd looked scared and kept asking about places to hide. Crawford cross-examined each one, poking holes where he could, but the damage was done. By the time Ashford rested his case, the courtroom mood had shifted. People were whispering. Dalton could feel their judgment like a physical weight. Then it was Crawford's turn. I call Serena Reeves to the stand. Serena stood and Dalton wanted to grab her hand and pull her back down. Wanted to tell Crawford this was a mistake, that putting her up there would only let Ashford tear her apart. But she walked to the witness stand with her head high, and when she swore to tell the truth, her voice didn't shake. Crawford started gentle. Mrs. Reeves, can you tell the court about your father's arrangement with the Ashford family? I didn't know about it until after my mother died, Serena said. My father had been making deals behind closed doors for years. When my mother got sick, he promised the Ashfords I would marry Marcus in exchange for paying his debts and maintaining business connections through my mother's family. I found out about the contract when I was going through my father's papers after his death. And what was your reaction? I was horrified. I'd never met Marcus Ashford, never agreed to marry him, but suddenly I was being told I had no choice, that my father had signed away my future before he died. Did you try to get out of the arrangement? I tried everything. I spoke to lawyers, but they said the contract was binding. I tried to talk to the Ashfords, but they refused to release me. Marcus himself told me it didn't matter whether I wanted the marriage or not. It was happening regardless of my feelings. Ashford stood. Objection. Hearsay. Sustained, Harmon said. Stick to what you directly experienced, Mrs. Reeves. Serena nodded. I was told by multiple people that I had no choice, that I would marry Marcus whether I agreed or not.
So 3 days before the wedding, I packed what I could carry and left. I used my mother's maiden name to buy a train ticket west and applied to a marriage broker seeking a fresh start somewhere the Ashfords couldn't control my life. And when you met Mr. Reeves? For the first time, Serena smiled. I was terrified. I'd been running for months, looking over my shoulder, barely sleeping, but Dalton was kind, patient. He didn't push. He offered me a partnership, a chance to build something real instead of being trapped in something false. So I stayed. And you married him? Yes. Of my own free will, because I wanted to. Not because anyone forced me, not because of any contract, but because I chose him. Crawford nodded. No further questions. Ashford stood for cross-examination, and his smile was predatory. Mrs. Reeves, you say you chose to marry Mr. Reeves, but isn't it true you married him specifically to evade your legal obligations to my clients? I married him because I wanted a life of my own choosing. That's not what I asked. Did you marry him to avoid marrying Marcus Ashford? Serena's jaw tightened. I married him because I loved him, because he saw me as a person, not property. Love? Ashford's eyebrows rose. You'd known him for 3 weeks. That's rather convenient, isn't it? You don't get to decide how long love takes. And it's also convenient that marrying him gave you legal protection from our claims. It gave me protection from being sold like cattle, yes. Objection, Crawford called. Argumentative. Sustained. Mr. Ashford, ask your questions without the commentary. Ashford shifted tactics. You mentioned your father's debts that were paid by the Ashford family as part of the marriage contract. Do you dispute that those debts were real? No. And do you dispute that your father accepted payment for those debts? No, but thank you. So you admit your family accepted valuable consideration for this arrangement, money that was paid in good faith with the expectation you would honor the commitment. My father accepted it, I didn't. I never agreed to anything. You lived in your father's house, benefited from his income, wore clothes and ate food paid for with Ashford money. Are you saying you didn't benefit from the arrangement? Serena's face went pale, and Dalton saw the trap closing. I was a child. I didn't know where the money came from. But you benefited nonetheless. And when it came time to repay that benefit, you fled rather than honor your family's obligations. I fled an unwanted marriage to a man I didn't love. Or you fled consequences you didn't want to face. Ashford turned to the judge. No further questions. Serena stepped down, looking shaken, and Dalton wanted to kill Ashford for the calculated cruelty of it. But Crawford was already calling his next witness. I call Dalton Reeves to the stand. Dalton walked up, feeling like he was heading to his own execution. He swore the oath and sat down, trying to meet Serena's eyes across the courtroom. She gave him a small, encouraging nod. Crawford started simple. Mr. Reeves, why did you send for a mail-order bride? I was lonely. The ranch needed help I couldn't provide alone. I thought a partnership made sense. And when Serena arrived? She was different than I expected. More afraid. More wounded. But she worked hard, cared about the place, made it feel like a home again, so I asked her to stay. When did you decide to marry her? When I realized the Ashfords were coming for her. I wanted to protect her, give her legal standing so they couldn't just drag her back east. Crawford paused. So you married her for practical reasons? Dalton knew this was the key moment, the truth that would either save them or condemn them. He looked at Serena and saw her watching him with those dark, trusting eyes. I married her because I needed to protect her, he said slowly. But I stayed married to her because I fell in love with her. Somewhere between the mail-order arrangement and the legal marriage and the fear of losing her, it became real. I don't know exactly when it happened, but it did. You love her? Yes. Even though you barely knew her? I know her now. I know she hums when she cooks and talks to the chickens like they understand her. I know she's terrified of thunder but loves rain. I know she's been broken by people who should have protected her and she still manages to trust again. I know she makes my house feel alive instead of dead. Yeah, I love her, and I'll keep loving her whether this court recognizes our marriage or not. The courtroom was silent. Crawford nodded. No further questions. Ashford stood for cross-examination, and his smile was gone. Mr. Reeves, you said you married Mrs. Reeves to protect her. Protect her from what, exactly? From being forced into a marriage she didn't want? So you admit you married her specifically to interfere with the Ashford family's legal claim? I married her to keep her safe from people who think they can own other people. That's a very noble sentiment, but it doesn't change the fact that your marriage was designed to circumvent existing legal obligations. There were no legal obligations. You can't sell a woman in Wyoming. We're not selling anyone, Mr. Reeves. We're enforcing a contract. A contract she never signed. A contract her father signed with full legal authority. Dalton felt his temper rising. Her father's dead. He doesn't get to control her life from the grave. But he does get to bind her to legal agreements made during his lifetime. That's how contracts work. Not in Wyoming. Not with people. Ashford's face hardened. You're a simple rancher, Mr. Reeves. You don't understand the complexities of contract law or familial obligations. What you call protection, the law calls interference. Then the law's wrong. Objection, Crawford shouted. Mr. Ashford is testifying, not questioning. Sustained. Mr. Ashford, stick to questions or I'll hold you in contempt. Ashford took a breath, visibly controlling himself. Mr. Reeves, do you have any evidence that Marcus Ashford ever threatened or coerced Miss Vale? She told me hearsay. Do you have direct evidence? No, but no further questions. Dalton stepped down, feeling like he'd been beaten. Crawford called a few more witnesses. Mrs. Patterson, who testified that Serena and Dalton seemed genuinely affectionate together, the general store clerk, who said the same, but it felt weak compared to the Ashford machine. Finally, both sides rested. Judge Harmon sat back in his chair, steepling his fingers. This is a complex case touching on several areas of law, he said. Contract law, marriage law, territorial jurisdiction. I'm going to take a recess to review the evidence and make my ruling. Court will reconvene in 1 hour. The courtroom erupted in conversation as Harmon left. Dalton turned to Serena, who looked pale and exhausted. How bad is it? She whispered. I don't know. Crawford gathered his papers. Could go either way. Harmon's a fair judge, but the law isn't entirely on our side. We did our best. And if it's not enough? Serena asked. Then we file an appeal. Take it to the Territorial Supreme Court if we have to. With what money? We're already broke from this. Crawford didn't have an answer to that. They spent the recess outside the courthouse, too nervous to eat or talk. Dalton held Serena's hand and tried not to think about what would happen if they lost. Tried not to imagine her being forced onto a train back east, forced to marry Marcus Ashford, forced to disappear from his life completely. The hour felt like 10 years. When they filed back into the courtroom, Judge Harmon was already at the bench. His face was unreadable as everyone settled into their seats. I've reviewed the testimony and evidence, he said, and I've come to a decision. He looked at Serena. Mrs. Reeves, please stand. Serena stood, and Dalton stood with her, his hand finding hers under the table. This court has heard compelling arguments from both sides, Harmon continued. The Ashford family claims you are bound by a contract entered into by your late father. You claim that contract is invalid because you never consented to it. After careful consideration, I find in your favor. Dalton felt Serena sag against him. The contract in question, Harmon went on, was signed without Miss Vale's knowledge or consent when she was of legal age to make her own decisions. Under Wyoming territorial law, no person can be compelled to enter into marriage without their explicit consent, regardless of any agreements made by family members. The Ashford contract, while possibly valid in Pennsylvania, has no force in this jurisdiction. Theodore Ashford stood. Your Honor, we respectfully— I'm not finished, Counselor. Harmon's voice was sharp. Furthermore, I find that the marriage between Dalton Reeves and Serena Vale Reeves was entered into legally and in good faith. While the timing may have been influenced by the Ashford family's pursuit, that does not constitute fraud. People marry for many reasons: love, companionship, protection, partnership. All of those are valid. And based on the testimony I've heard, this marriage encompasses all of them. He looked at Serena and Dalton. Your marriage is valid and will remain so. The petition to invalidate it is denied. The courtroom exploded. People were shouting, some in celebration, some in outrage. Eleanor Ashford was on her feet demanding an appeal. Theodore Ashford was already gathering his papers with a face like stone. But Dalton didn't hear any of it.
He turned to Serena and saw tears streaming down her face. "We won," she whispered. "We actually won." "Yeah, we did." She threw her arms around him, and he held her while she sobbed into his chest. Tears of relief and joy and exhaustion all mixed together. Crawford was shaking his hand, congratulating them, but Dalton barely registered it. All he cared about was the woman in his arms who was finally, truly free. They left the courthouse to find half the town waiting outside. Some were congratulatory, others disapproving, but Dalton didn't care. He helped Serena into the wagon and drove them home, away from the noise and judgment and back to the quiet of their ranch. When they pulled up to the house, Serena didn't move to get down. She just sat there looking at it, the weathered boards, the repaired fence, the garden she'd planted, the chickens scratching in their yard. "It's really ours," she said. "They can't take it away." "No, they can't." She turned to him. "What happens now?" "Now? Now we live. We build the life we want instead of the life everyone else tried to force on us." "Just like that?" "Just like that." She laughed, and it sounded free in a way he'd never heard before. "I don't know how to do that. I've spent so long running, I don't know how to stop." "Then we figure it out together, one day at a time." They climbed down from the wagon and walked into their house. Not his house or her house, but theirs. Dalton built a fire while Serena made coffee, and they sat together on the sofa in the parlor, watching the flames dance. "Do you think they'll appeal?" Serena asked. "Probably. But Crawford said it would take months, and they'd have to do it in territorial court, where they have even less influence. Eventually they'll give up." "Will they?" "Yeah, because you're not worth the trouble to them anymore. Eleanor said it herself. This is about pride and appearances. Once word gets out they lost to a rancher in Wyoming, they'll cut their losses and find some other woman to marry Marcus off to." He pulled her closer. "You're free, Serena. Really free." She was quiet for a long time, and when she spoke, her voice was small. "I don't know who I am without the running, without the fear. That's been my whole life for so long." "Then you get to figure out who you want to be. You get to choose for the first time in your life." "What if I choose wrong?" "Then you choose again. That's the whole point. It's your choice now. Yours and mine. Nobody else gets a say." She turned to look at him, and there was something vulnerable in her expression. "And if I choose you? If I choose this life, this ranch, this marriage, not because I'm running from something else, but because I actually want it, then I'd say you've made the best decision either of us ever made." She kissed him then, and it was different from the desperate kisses before. This was soft and sure, the kiss of someone who wasn't afraid anymore, someone who'd decided to stay. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Serena rested her forehead against his. "I love you," she said. "I know I said it before, but now I can say it without being terrified. It's just the fear talking. I love you, Dalton Reeves, and I want to build a life with you. I love you too, and we will. Starting right now." They stayed up late into the night, making plans. They'd expand the garden in the spring, buy more cattle, maybe hire a ranch hand if they could afford it. They'd fix up the upstairs, turn Elizabeth's old room into something new, maybe a nursery eventually, when they were ready. They'd visit town more, make friends, become part of the community instead of hiding from it. They'd live, not perfectly, not without problems, but together. The next few weeks passed in a blur of normalcy that felt almost surreal. The Ashfords left town without another word. Victor Hale disappeared back east. Crawford sent word that no appeal had been filed and likely never would be. The Ashfords were cutting their losses. Serena threw herself into the ranch with renewed energy. She expanded the chicken coop, planted a vegetable garden 3 times the size of the original, even helped Dalton with the cattle when he needed an extra pair of hands. She laughed more, smiled more, slept without nightmares. And slowly, the locked room upstairs transformed. They cleared out the last of Elizabeth's things, gave them proper homes in storage or with families who could use them, painted the walls a warm yellow, replaced the dusty curtains with new ones Serena sewed herself. It became a guest room, then a sewing room, then finally just a room, no longer haunted, no longer forbidden. One evening, about a month after the trial, Dalton came in from the barn to find Serena in the kitchen with a strange look on her face. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Nothing's wrong. I need to tell you something." His stomach clenched. "What?" She took a breath. I'm pregnant. The world stopped. Dalton stared at her, unable to process the words. Pregnant. A baby. After everything with Elizabeth, the thought of going through that again. Say something, Serena said nervously. You're scaring me. Are you sure? I've missed 2 cycles. I'm tired all the time. I can't stand the smell of coffee anymore. I'm sure. Dalton sat down heavily at the table, his mind racing. The fear was immediate and overwhelming. Fear of loss, of history repeating, of not being able to save her the way he couldn't save Elizabeth. But underneath that was something else, something that felt almost like hope. Dalton, please say something. He looked up at her and saw his own fear reflected in her eyes. Are you scared? Terrified, she admitted. After what happened to Elizabeth, after everything you told me, I'm scared something will go wrong. Me too. But I'm also happy. I want this. I want a family with you. I want to build something that's ours. Dalton stood and crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. We'll do it different this time. We'll get a doctor early. We'll be careful. We'll do everything right. And if something still goes wrong, then we'll face it together. But we don't have to borrow trouble. We can just hope and prepare and trust that things will work out. She pulled back to look at him. You really think they will? I think we've survived everything else they've thrown at us. We can survive this too. Over the next few months, they prepared. Dalton rode to the nearest town with a good doctor and arranged for him to visit monthly to check on Serena. They fixed up the old nursery, this time with joy instead of grief. They told their friends in town, who threw Serena a party that made her cry happy tears. And as Serena's belly grew, so did Dalton's hope. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe they'd been through enough tragedy and earned some happiness. Maybe the universe would be kind. Winter came hard and early. Snow piled up around the ranch, cutting them off from town for weeks at a time. But inside the house, everything was warm and bright. Serena knitted baby clothes while Dalton read to her from books they'd ordered from back east. They talked about names, about the future, about what kind of parents they wanted to be. They fought sometimes. Serena's hormones made her emotional, and Dalton's protectiveness made him overbearing. But they always worked it out, because they'd learned how to talk to each other, how to be honest even when it was hard, how to choose each other every single day. The baby came in early spring, on a morning when the world was turning green and new again. The doctor was there, along with 2 midwives from town and Mrs. Patterson, who'd insisted on helping despite Serena's protests. Dalton spent the entire labor terrified it would end like before. Every cry of pain from Serena made him relive Elizabeth's death. Every hour that passed felt like it was counting down to tragedy. He held Serena's hand so tight he probably bruised her, but she didn't complain, just squeezed back and told him it would be okay. And it was. After 12 hours of labor, their daughter was born screaming and healthy and absolutely perfect. The doctor placed her in Serena's arms, and Dalton looked at his wife and child through a blur of tears. We did it, Serena whispered, exhausted and triumphant. We actually did it. Yeah, we did. They named her Roseanne Reeves, Rose for new beginnings, Anne for Elizabeth, a bridge between past and future. She had Serena's dark hair and Dalton's stubborn chin and lungs that could wake the dead when she wanted to be fed. She was everything. The months after Rose's birth were the hardest and best of Dalton's life. Sleepless nights and constant worry mixed with moments of pure joy, when Rose smiled or grabbed his finger or made that little snuffling sound when she slept. Serena was exhausted but happy, more confident than he'd ever seen her. They fell into a new rhythm. Dalton handled the ranch work and night feedings. Serena handled Rose during the day and managed the house. They worked together, supported each other, built a life that felt real and earned. One evening, when Rose was about 6 months old, Dalton found Serena sitting in the rocking chair in what had once been Elizabeth's room, nursing Rose and humming softly. He stood in the doorway watching them, and something tight in his chest finally loosened. What are you thinking? Serena asked without looking up. That I never thought I'd be happy again. After Elizabeth died, I was just existing, going through motions. Then you showed up scared and running, and somehow we built this. He gestured at the room, at her, at their daughter. Built something worth having. Worth fighting for. Yeah, that too. She looked up at him and smiled. Come here. He crossed to them and sat on the floor beside the chair.
Rose had fallen asleep nursing, her tiny hand fisted in Serena's dress. Dalton reached out and touched her soft hair, still amazed that something this perfect could be his. "I was thinking," Serena said quietly, "about what Crawford said during the trial, about how people marry for different reasons. I married you out of fear at first, to escape. But somewhere along the way, it became about something else."
What? Building something real. Choosing to stay instead of run. Choosing to trust even when it was terrifying. Choosing you every day. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. She shifted Rose to her shoulder, patting her back gently. "I think that's what love is, really. Not some grand feeling that hits you all at once, but the choice to keep choosing someone, even when it's hard, even when you're scared." Dalton thought about that, about the choice Serena had made to trust him, the choice he'd made to let her in despite his fear of loss, the 1,000 small choices they'd made every day since, to communicate, to forgive, to try again, to build something together. "Yeah," he said. "I think you're right." Rose let out a small burp, and they both laughed. Serena stood carefully and carried her to the cradle they'd set up in the corner. She laid her down gently, covering her with the blanket Dalton's mother had made decades ago. "She's going to have a good life," Serena said, watching Rose sleep. "Better than the one I had. Better than the one I was supposed to have. We'll make sure of it." "I know we will. 'Cause we'll teach her that she gets to choose, that nobody gets to decide her future but her. That love is something you build, not something you're forced into." She turned to face him. "We'll teach her to be brave, to run when she needs to and stand her ground when it matters. We'll teach her she's worth fighting for," Dalton added, "worth protecting, worth everything." Serena moved into his arms and they stood together watching their daughter sleep. Outside, the Wyoming wind howled across the prairie, but inside, everything was warm and safe and theirs. A year later, they stood in that same room, no longer Elizabeth's room or a guest room or a sewing room, but Rose's room, and watched their daughter take her first wobbly steps from the bed to the window. She fell halfway there, laughed, and tried again. "She's stubborn," Serena said. "Gets it from her mother. From both of us, I think." Dalton pulled Serena close, resting his chin on top of her head. Beyond the window, the ranch spread out green and thriving. They'd expanded in the past year, bought more cattle, hired a young hand to help with the heavy work. The garden was producing more than they could eat, so Serena had started selling vegetables in town. The chickens had multiplied. The house was full of life and noise and love. Everything they'd fought for, everything they'd chosen. Rose finally made it to the window and slapped her chubby hands against the glass, laughing at her own accomplishment. Serena scooped her up, kissing her cheek, and Rose babbled something that might have been mama, or might have been nonsense. Dalton looked at them, his wife and daughter, his family, his whole world, and felt gratitude so intense it hurt. They'd been through hell to get here, had fought people with more power and money and influence, had overcome grief and fear and their own broken pieces. But they'd made it, not perfectly, not without scars, but together. And that was enough. That was everything. Years later, when Rose was old enough to ask questions, Dalton would tell her the story of how he and Serena met. About a lonely rancher and a frightened woman and a marriage that started as convenience but became something real. About fighting for the right to choose your own life even when powerful people tried to take that choice away. He'd tell her about her mother's courage in running toward an uncertain future instead of accepting a certain prison. About learning that love wasn't something that happened to you, but something you built brick by brick, choice by choice, day by day. He'd tell her that family wasn't always the people you were born to, but the people you chose, and who chose you back. That home wasn't a place but a feeling, safety, acceptance, belonging. And he'd tell her she could choose her own future, write her own story, build her own life. That she didn't owe anyone her happiness or her freedom. That she was worth fighting for, worth protecting, worth every hard choice and scary moment. But that was years away. For now, Dalton just held his family and watched the sun set over the ranch, painting the sky in shades of gold and red. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new work, new choices to make. But tonight, in this moment, everything was exactly as it should be. Serena looked up at him and smiled. "What are you thinking about?" "Just how lucky I am. How we both are." "Luck had nothing to do with it. We earned this. Yeah, I guess we did. Rose wiggled free and toddled over to Dalton, grabbing his leg and demanding up in her imperious toddler way. He scooped her up, and she immediately grabbed his nose, giggling. She's going to be trouble, Serena said fondly. She's going to be amazing. That too. They stood together as the last light faded from the sky. A family built not from obligation or expectation, but from choice and courage, and the stubborn determination to build something worth having. The ranch around them was quiet, except for the wind and the distant sound of cattle. Inside, the house was warm and full of the life they'd created together. It wasn't the life either of them had planned. It was better, because it was theirs, and nobody could take that away.